Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. We're early today because although there is no Tom, we're still going to have a three-person show because I am very happy to be joined by Ian and Ritchie from Just Play Games from the Just Saying podcast. Gentlemen, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us on. Yeah, very good, Vince. Thanks. I'm Ian. Yeah.
It is good to have you guys on. This is I'm happy how quickly we got this together because this was a lot of discussion I'm keen to have. I feel like from listening to your podcast and watching you on Twitter and stuff that you guys are deep thinkers who have a lot of really good thoughts about the tournament and the tournament scene and about making this the best possible game. And obviously at least dabble in thinking about the same stuff. And I know at the same time, we have some differing opinions on things and some things we're very much the same on. So this is going to be a really fun discussion we're going to have today about the tournament meta, the meta. We're going meta because we're not talking about like armies as much and stuff like that. A little bit, but not, deep diving on that. This isn't like, hey, Daughters of Cain, pretty good, right? That's not what we're here today to talk about. We're talking about the structure and stuff like that. So glad to have you gentlemen here.
Thank you.
But first off, without Tom, I shall now perform Tom's task of, talking about some news items. The one job Tom has. By the way, he's with his family this week in, I think they're in Disney World or something like that. Whatever, some waste of time that isn't doing hobby.
I was jealous.
Don't be. There's nothing good about it. It's a terrible, awful experience. There you go. Okay. There's going to be some like Disney heads who are really upset about my saying this, but I don't like people or crowds or lines or loud noise. So,
okay.
Disney, not for me.
Don't go to Disney World. Yeah.
It's sort of the opposite of the Venn diagram for my likes, but hey, maybe you like it and that's fine. Like what you like. Okay. So let's talk about some news, guys. And some of the stuff, you know what? We've got a rumor engine picture. I don't think we care very much, but you gentlemen also do some 40K, right?
Yeah.
All right.
More than me, but a little bit, yeah.
All right. So we got a little bit. So we'll jump into some rumor engine picture here. I'll show it. And we're gonna so I'm gonna default to you then. What is this?
I mean, it looks like bullets or maybe small missiles.
Okay.
So maybe, I don't know, like a new ammo belt for a new the Orc rocket guys. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe like an ammo feed or something like that, like looters are going to redo stuff like that. But they mostly be redoing vehicles, haven't they? So
yeah,
that's what we've seen so far.
It's ammo for something with small rocket-based projectiles. That's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I definitely am with the Orc prediction because it feels like it's photoshopped, right? Like if you look around the edge here where things are cut out, like it feels like this is hanging in front of something. Like you see how the shadow is uneven, right?
Yeah. You're clearly more used to looking at these things and picking details out than I am.
2 years of watching this rumor engine and trying to predict things and being wrong, I'd say 90% of the time, but at least I've gotten pretty good at looking at it. Yeah. So
we don't know what this one is yet. Then no.
It's a rumor engine. That's the kind of the point in it.
Oh, I thought it might be one that they've shown and then announced. Damn no.
Yeah, I mean, some of them we know pretty fast, right? Like some of them are kind of on the nose, or like they'll show it, and then immediately someone breaks it. They're like, "Oh, hey, it's this. It's 2 minutes and 37 seconds in this one teaser video you did. That's what it is. There it is. Solved it." I like it when that happens. Really eliminates all the work that I have to do. Makes it pretty easy.
I guess if they'd rumor engined like 16 boobs on a tentacle, we would have probably known what that was.
Pretty easy, right? Yeah.
Speaking of which, that's our next big piece of news. I mean, let's be honest. Let's get into it. So during October had a bit of an interruption here because somebody, I don't know who, but somebody put up a sprue onto eBay to sell it. I'm guessing somebody who, this is all conjecture on my part, somebody who probably had like a preview copy or had gotten a hold of something beforehand of Wrath and Rapture, since it's the new box set with Khorne versus Slaanesh. And they decided to try to sell part of the sprue, and people saw it, caught it, noticed it, and noticed that we had a new, probably Seeker model. This broke in the morning. And by late afternoon, what did we have but a very special video with Adam, the new member of the community team who came over from Middle Earth. And he did a great video with the potato camera and the Games Workshop leaks department, which if you haven't watched the video, I really encourage it. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But
all that stuff.
It was solid that they pulled that together that quick. It's good work. But of course, what did we have? Oh boy, goody. They gave us what we really wanted, which was an image of the new Seeker. And there he is in all her glory. It's pretty great.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah,
I'm just glad to see that they never turned away so much from what it always was. There was always that fear for a long time that they would, do away with boobs completely and all that type of stuff, wasn't there really?
Or just do away with Slaanesh, I think maybe was the direction. They've changed so many things, haven't they? So maybe that was, and then they've flip-flopped and decided to republish them again. But they're such like a iconic army, Slaanesh, aren't they? Like, it would have been a shame for them to go away.
One of the four gods. Chaos is their main IP, their own thing, isn't it, really? When Age of Sigmar launched and they were all about pushing their own stuff rather than just like generically doing humans, orcs and elves and whatever. Like, it was all about chaos, and it was weird not seeing Slaanesh in there as much, wasn't it? So yeah.
Yep. I mean, this is this fiend is pretty sweet. I love the redesign. I hate the old fiends. I think they're I have a bunch of them because Slaanesh was my second army. I played Skaven for a long time, starting in the 90s, and then I got into Slaanesh, and I've never looked back. I'm a firm adherent to Excess and the Dark Princess. And I love that redesign. I'm also happy to see all the sort of BDSM leather gear on that fiend. I've been saying they're going to go in the leather daddy direction for a long time.
I don't even remember the fiend you're probably talking about, because I had a massive break of Warhammer in the in my 20s really.
Sure.
A load of models come out that people say, "Oh, that's the old one." I'm like, "Oh, I've never even seen that before. It looks new to me." Like the fiend that I remember was the on all fours with the claws at the front.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, it's that one.
Was that the previous one? Was it? Yeah.
Oh
God.
1997 or 8 maybe. I don't know. It's hard to remember. There was a really, really old one from the late 80s, early 90s who was kind of smaller and kind of weird looking. And then they made the new metal one.
Right.
And that was probably I think the late 90s.
Those were the best Slaanesh. I mean, that was the era with what's the guy called who made the famous demonettes that everyone
the
loved?
Juan Diaz demonettes. Yeah, that came out in 2002 or 3.
Yeah, that era, those middle era Slaanesh stuff is all the best stuff for me, and then all the later stuff was kind of crappy.
Nice.
The earlier stuff was all the best stuff. Early to mid stuff was all the best for me, and I think that's a bit more what they've gone back to there, isn't it? Which is
it feels like it, because that Seeker is very lithe. Right, lithe, long limbed. One of the things that was great about the Juan Diaz daemonettes is that they had much more of a lithe, almost acrobatic stance to them. Then they weren't totally alien, right? The Juan Diaz ones were cool because they famously had a claw, but then also some of them had a hand with a knife, right? So it's this nice mixture. Whereas the later ones are all just snippy, snippy, snap, snap all the time. Right?
Yeah. I love all the preview stuff now. I was talking to someone the other day, this guy's got all of a sprue and he's selling it. I don't know if you remember the scene. I don't know if this happened to yourself, but back in the day, you used to be able to phone mail order. So we'd phone the trolls and mail order. And we say, "Have you got any pre-release stuff?" And they say, "Yeah," and they just sell you it.
Yeah.
So when they the ones I remember buying were the Hive Tyrant and the Lictor, the metal ones. Just phone, "Look at any pre-release stuff." Yeah. Got Hive Tyrants and Lictors. I'm like, "What?" Yeah. Okay. I'll have some. You just buy them and they send you them. I've got them months before they come out. Can you imagine that now? Them just flog off these things that we've cast and they work. So sell them. No instructions to this chap from Liverpool. They used to do that all the time. That was amazing, but no more.
The world has definitely changed in that regard. Yes. Much more tightly controlled cycle now, but I'd say we're still in a better place than we were in the middle time there, where it was maybe a week before a thing came out, you saw a picture and then it was in stores and that was it, right? You had nothing else. So this is a pretty good middle ground. The real question now is just how much of Slaanesh gets some new, how many other new Slaanesh figures. My guess is at least 3 new models. I have my own reasons for thinking that, but there will be at least 3 new models. And I'm counting any Keeper of Secrets related thing as one. I don't care if it has like multiple builds, like if you can make that and like Fulgrim and Kari or whatever. I don't like that's one. That's one thing.
Kari, yeah. I forgot about. Oh.
What's that?
I forgot about Enkari.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man. There'll definitely be a Keeper of Secrets. Like
has to be, right? Has to be. There's just like they didn't redo the other 3 to leave this one like the crappy metal one.
Yeah.
It's like a little tiny baby thing. I love when you see it on the table in games and people are using the other like real greater demons, you know, now. So like there's this bloodthirster and this giant bird and this giant fat guo, and then there's just like this little Keeper of Secrets walking around like the size of an ogre. Yeah. It's pretty great.
Exalted one the way anyway, isn't it? So yeah. Exalted one is naughty.
I really want to use the old metal Nagash instead of the new Nagash.
Oh no, you don't.
when I play Nagash.
Sure.
Because I'm pretty sure it's legal because it's a Games Workshop model. So
you just put him on the new base. As long as he's on the big like 160 round, you should be fine.
Yeah, stick him on that and a massive pile of skulls and
be great.
It would not be great.
I too have a special love for Clown Nagash. I mean, he is like famously maybe one of the best figures ever, right? Like he somehow bridges the gap between simultaneously being the best thing and the worst thing ever. And that this guy was painted as like the ultimate evil in the world. And he just looked like he had wandered in from Barnum and Bailey's, you know? But
I'll never get the attachment to the old stuff, you know, the money that people pay for it and all that sort of thing. They're just bad. You've been chasing some skeletons, haven't you? Some metal skeletons around.
Yeah, I want a unit of old metal skeletons from the 90s just to have a different unit of skeletons.
Nice. Yeah, that's skeleton's the kind of thing too that they've made so many different ranges of, you know, like you could reach to some interesting places. Get yourself a couple of the original like Hero Quest or Warhammer Quest skeletons or whatever, right? Mix those guys in. That'd be cool. There you go. All right. Other stuff this week. Are you guys Shadespire enthusiasts? Either of you or Underworlds, I guess? Nightfall?
Yeah, great game. Yeah. We haven't played as much of it as we'd like recently. Definitely, you know, we've been playing so much Age of Sigmar, but
yeah, good game.
Good game. Like one of the ones he really knocked it out the park on that one, wasn't it? So, and lovely range miniatures as well. So,
are you excited for the new stuff? So, while we're talking, let's take a look because we got that. We're getting the breakdowns, obviously, of the Eyes of Nine or whatever. These guys right here, or Nine Eyes, or I don't know what it's called. The Cyclops leading these people, the Tzeentch group.
These are okay, aren't they? They're a bit less cohesive as some of the other ones. It looks like, you know, well, here's a couple of Tzeentch models they put in a warband, whereas the other ones they gel together a bit better, I think, than these. So they don't inspire, right? Is that? I think that's their thing for them. Yeah.
Yep. I'll be honest. I don't like them. I don't.
I think like I don't know. They don't look like particularly like a warband of togetherness or whatever you want to say. So
yeah. I like the two newer models in there, the Cyclopsy looking guy and the Samurai Zangor. I definitely like those two models. I think they're great, but yeah, they don't look like a warband to me.
Right.
The others do.
Also, both the Arcanites, they feel like they're just in weird poses, right? Like the way they're kind of like hunched really low. We do have a female Arcanite, which is kind of cool. That's neat.
That's sweet.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
But I just like, I don't know, man. I honestly, this guy is my biggest letdown. This caster Cyclopean dude. When I saw the art for him, I was so excited because, by the way, this guy's like easy grab for any, you know, caster or chaos sorcerer, Lord of Tzeentch or something like that, right? As a stand-in for any of the 52 different casters that Tzeentch has. You know, you don't have to use him as his actual model. He'd be just a cool stand-in. But I don't know. He just looks so spindly and inconsequential. Like his waist feels too small. Maybe it's the angle of this picture. I don't know. But I don't like these dudes.
Yeah, it does look a bit thin. I like the model a bit more than that, I think, but he does look a little bit on the thin side.
Yeah. But now let's talk about what is awesome. These guys right here. I'm all in. These guys are amazing from top to bottom. I don't know how you feel about goblins or whatever, but we are in a wheelhouse aesthetic that I absolutely love. Between the dude with the thing over his eyes that can't see and is clearly shooting randomly, to the guy with the mushroom like pinned to his hat.
Yeah.
To the dude like roasting mushrooms on his head that he's warming up his brand. To the drunken fanatic. To the guy with a literal giant moth as his lantern. I mean,
I'm a fan. Yeah. Like I like Moon Clan. These will be the next army I collect them paints. You know, I've already got a nice chunk to get started with done. So yeah, the stuff you pointed out is just brilliant. They're all great. Like love the fanatic in a bit of a different pose to the normal ones they've had over the Stan the Whirling as well. So these are brilliant.
The fact that he crushed a snotling under here too.
Yeah, I missed that. Yeah, man, you got a good eye for this stuff. These are
so much detail on these models nowadays, right? Like, the bases of actually the bases on the Zinch models were nice as well. I
like the little pearls and
the little blue
similar to the Squig on the right there.
Yeah. That's obviously the Night Felt swirlies, I imagine.
Like when I see these Squigs, all I think to myself is, just give me the box set, right? Yeah. Just like give me the box of 10 or 20 Squigs of these casts. It could just be like these two repeated, and I wouldn't be that upset about it compared to the Squig we have now. But you know, if it was even more, I would just feel more spoiled. These guys are amazing.
What's with the flying one? I expected that to be in this warband. I never looked into that anymore.
Remember so we haven't seen the full warband yet. You're talking about the Squigian, right? The flying Squig or the squat, however you want to say it.
And the troll as well, isn't there?
Oh yeah, the troll, yeah.
I don't know.
And there's also like an angry tree or something. Or mushroom tree. It's a weird warband. We know it's coming. It's its own thing. I think the troll is actually the leader. And like, so we saw it, but we saw the like art cover, but we haven't seen, and we saw the troll model and the Squigian model, but we haven't seen the whole, like that style of release for them yet. They're coming. They're clearly going to be a weird warband. That is for sure. Like it's the all monster warband apparently. So
yeah, 2 monsters on a Squigian.
That's pretty cool.
I like it.
I mean, it makes sense. There's got to be like anybody who's ever gone exploring a dungeon. There are also wandering random monsters down there. That's classic stuff. So I'm glad to see that.
Yeah. If my Warhammer Quest experience is anything to go by, one of the war bands will be 14 Bloodthirsters.
Yeah. Yeah. Roll that on the table. Got a bit bad towards the end, Warhammer Quest, didn't it? Like it got a bit hard.
It got a bit hard. Yeah. Nice. All right. Some other quick news items here. We had mentioned it in a previous show. Community member LLV, who has been doing some really great work and working with various TOs to update stats from tournaments as to number of appearances of armies, the amount that they appear in the meta, the number of sort of 5 wins, 4 wins, 3 wins, 2 wins, 1 win, 0 wins, and so on and so forth, has been updated. And I'll link out to that. I think Rob from the Honest Wargamer tweeted that out and everything, and has made that resource available to people. Yes, I don't know if you want me to. I knew that was you. Sorry, he's in the comments right now, and he commented that's me. I didn't know if you wanted me to say your real name or not, or just call L, because everybody calls you LV. But yes, thank you for doing all that great work. It's pretty wonderful that we're getting this rolling resource of information. What do you gentlemen think about that? Like, did you look over the new one? What are your thoughts at a high level on it?
Yeah, we give some thoughts on our podcast when the stats first come out, and I talk to Damien quite regularly about stats and stuff and his stats, and my thoughts on it have always been that I work with a lot of stats and data like this for a living, so any data, you can only read into it as much as it can be quantified what it means. And it's so hard to do that with what is ultimately still a small sample size.
Right.
It's cool to look at the top and say, right, Daughters of Cain at the top, their win percentage is ridiculous. All these kind of things, they're clearly smashing it. But we don't have the context I would like around that.
Sure.
That said, it's still correct.
It
is reflecting what we would have said if there were no stats. Is that Daughters of Cain are the best army?
Yeah.
Death are very, very good.
Right.
You know, the Phoenix Temple are broken. All these things are being reflected in the stats. So, you know, the context, even though the context isn't maybe there numerically the way I would like it, the stats are showing the things that we would expect.
Yeah, and it's concentrating on wins, you know. So whatever results, whatever soft scores or anything else in the tournament that has placed someone, they took that out of it really, haven't they? And they just looked at
wins and losses,
and they put that in there. So I like that, and I like the you know, percentage of the meta is represented part. You know, that's one I like to look at. How many people are actually playing Stormcast, actually playing, you know, Daughters of Cain and stuff like that. So that's good, and it is getting more tournaments into it than I thought it would initially.
A lot of worldwide stuff.
Yeah, he's put a lot of stuff in that this week. Really, a lot of events have gone, haven't they, in the past 2 weeks, and he's got a lot of it together. So I think as it goes on, it's gonna get I'll get a lot more respect from me. Like, I'll look at them numbers and take a lot from it. I
think it's brilliant. I think it's something that, you know, it can never be a bad thing having more data about stuff. I think it's absolutely fantastic that it's getting done. You know, I think the guy's an absolute legend and should be up for one of those Hobby Legend awards, personally.
Yeah. For all the times that, you know, people like us will go, oh, the meta was all this, it was all this. You know, you can just go and look at it, can't you? Now, so they don't lie, the numbers, like, so yeah,
numbers don't lie.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of my favorite sayings ever is there's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. Okay. Now, like, I would only broker a piece of disagreement with something you said there. With more data can never be bad. Oh, it can be. Like, more data can certainly get bad when you get into a middle ground. Right. So, like, first of all, I do agree with everything you said. LLV is an absolute legend for putting this stuff together. This is a lot of hard work, and he's doing it in a way that I think aggregates it to as close to any, like, truth we can get at. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of hidden factors here that he doesn't have access to and could never have access to that keep us from, like, making ultimate causal inferences. We can make a lot of correlated inferences, right? Because like here would be, if you were to run data like this in a scientific statistical survey, you'd want background on the participants, right? Like, when you do this in a scientific study, I can look and go, okay, this is my group of males age 40 to 65, blah, 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 live in this geographic area. They're in this, they have this amount of economic income. My point is just, like, that's not cogent. None of that was being studied usually, right? It's just background data. That's the kind of stuff that LLV can't ever really get access to here that would actually be illuminating. Like, the meta percentage is probably the one that's on its surface the most prima facie self-obviously truthful, because that's just what it is. It is what it is. That is the number of people playing it. When you then try to make loops, causal loops to quality, it becomes tougher because you don't know. Some of the sample sizes are small enough that, like, literally 3 people could skew the data out, right? You could have, like, 3 high quality players jump to, like, who play in several of the tournaments that get aggregated, jump to an off army, smash face with it, and blow that percentage way out, right? And that would be very difficult. Like, you could trace to that because he does collect that, like, we know who's who, so you can trace it down there. But at the same time, like, when you look at, like, the Stormcast percentage, it becomes tough because, like, how many games has that person played total? How many years have they been in the hobby? What's their broader win percentage across everything? How many armies do they actually play? Right? Like, in other words, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of other hidden data I don't see. What were the exact scenarios they played in all 5 of those games? Right?
Yeah, there's like what matchups did you have and all stuff like that, isn't it?
Where Realms in play, what was the tournament pack doing? You know, where Realms
in play is a big one. Yeah,
there's a lot. And again, that comes back to the first thing I said. I think really is that, you know, the data's good there, but without qualifying the data, or without for a person to look at that data and draw conclusions, you have to know the things that you've just mentioned, like, that are things that we don't know. And the danger of the stats for me is when they're presented nicely like that, is there are people already on forums looking at those stats and going, well, Daughters of Cain are the best army, let's nerf them.
Right. And that's my fear. Exactly what you just said. Yes. That people will cross the bridge too far. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Something that they, from their point of view, like, someone who's doing coverage and is doing media on things, stats are always a big part of it, aren't they? Particularly when, like, sports come into it. American football loves to just hammer you with stats. I don't even know why they track that, and it's just like supports what you're saying, doesn't it? And that, so I can see it's good from that point of view as well.
LLV said that that realms and matchups are something that's being worked on, which is awesome. I'm glad to hear that. I think those are highly impactful factors, right? Like, again, there's so much in this game that's hidden as to the win and loss of a game beyond the army. Like, we tend to talk about lists and armies, and really that's, like, I would say it's a contributory factor to the win, but it's far off being determinative, being the determinative factor, right?
Because that could be padded by people who've just got 3 starter sets and mashed them together and gone to play.
Right, exactly. Like, Stormcast has an 1/8 percentage of a 1/8, appearance in the meta, which I believe fully, because there's been multiple starter sets. There's tons of ways to get them cheap. They're hugely in population. Soul Wars just came out. People love the new models. Yeah, but that, of course, means, as has been pointed out, that you're going to get a bigger spread of sort of experience of players, right? So you would expect to see them not pull a lot of 5s. Witches have a high financial barrier of entry, that is, say daughters do, and require a lot more finesse. And so there's all these sort of hidden factors to the nature of the thing. I have zero problem with the data being collected. I think it should be. I think it's useful. I think it's awesome. And as you said, I would completely support nominating LLV for Hobby Hero. I agree with that. That's like, this is hard work he's doing. That is very useful. We as a community need to be responsible with his data, right?
Yes.
And not jump to conclusions. So see the correlation, don't assume causation. Be responsible with the data we're presented with. Yes. If we just nerf whatever shows up at the top every time, that's going to be a pretty endless cycle, even when there's not necessarily a problem. So
something's got to be top.
Right. Yeah, like when you sort, that's something will end up at the top.
It doesn't mean there's anything wrong. No.
Exactly. That is such a good way to put that. Yeah, 100%. Okay. So I look forward to even more data getting pulled in there, because I think that's great. All right. Other things coming. We've got the Beasts of Chaos made to order. Speaking of the old models we mentioned earlier, we've got a little Beasts of Chaos made to order with the old Kazakh One Eye and what else is there? I'm trying to think of the other guys that were out there. I know they also had the Golrock, the 2-headed dragon, and Throg, the Troll King. I'll say this: if there's any old model that still holds up, that Throg, that's a pretty great model. That Throg, the Troll King.
I don't recall this one.
I don't think I remember that model either. No,
we have a chat about that quite a lot, don't we? What is the iconic model? Something that's held the test of time, doesn't it? And
Nagash,
not Nagash, the Lehman Russ battle tank. It's ancient stuff like that. Ian, not Nagash.
Nagash.
That Lehman Russ is a really good call. You're absolutely right. Like, that thing really it's been the same like Lehman Russ since I was playing in the 90s, and it still looks good.
Yeah, I remember I worked for them at the time when it come out, and they put some number how much it cost to make that mold, and it was so much money, and God, they've made that back God knows how many times, haven't they now? So great.
Yeah. So this is Throg, the Troll King. Here, I'll share it up. You'll know him as soon as you see him. Here we go. Ta-da! Guy.
Oh yeah.
I think he really is a fantastic model. Like, he has a great pose, like that victory pose he's doing, and just good.
He's cool. Dynamic. He's got a tactical rock on his base. Like, he's from when these kind of dynamic models really started becoming a thing.
Yeah.
Right, and he's done well, hasn't he?
Yeah. This is the one I would highly recommend you to avoid. This guy.
Whoa, I love that model. And it's probably like this big as well, right? Like, I don't know if I've ever seen one in person, but
that's one of the things that's most impressive about the new stuff for me. I always talk to people who come into the store, who are returning to the hobby, and that like old dragons and like the new stuff. You know how they've got this like a tank, you know, where they build a shell and they build it up to make like a bigger body, you know, like the more crusher. It's just so clever, and they're just so much better than those old spindly dragons now. So
the S dragons, famously, right? They were all just the letter S with some wings broaching somewhere off the middle. Yeah. Like if you're gonna build, if you want a Galrock, take it as a challenge and convert your own out of the hundreds of new, better designed available dragons on the market in miniatures makers who are doing incredible things with dragons and resin, and often at cheap prices. That dragon is just that Galrock model. I have a deep love of Galrock. I converted my Archaon to be riding an updated Galrock since he's like in a Zinch aspect. So I changed the heads to be 3 dragon heads. I figured Galrock gained an extra head when he got bigger and got served by Archaon. So like, so I get it. I've always loved Galrock as a concept. That model, that's a hard pass for me. Yeah. But there you go. If you're a fan of those things, hey, they're going to be available, so you can get yourself some old models this weekend. Okay. Other big item this week, which I think will probably come up later, but the hidden agenda has gotten published. Yes. So Games Workshop dipping a toe into providing some other rules for matched play. Let's call it that. Not necessarily just for tournaments, though certainly highly applicable there. Probably its most relevant use. And that is hidden agendas, a sort of a tactical scheme-like secondary objective in the game. And I think we're going to have some very different opinions about those. So we'll talk about that when we get into the tournament discussion later on. Okay. I think that's basically all our news items. I do want to take a quick moment here to give a shout out to friend of the show, Doom and Darkness, who took 5th place in the Sydney GT this last weekend with a wonderful soup mixed chaos list full of just a bunch of wacky nonsense. And I loved everything about his list. It was great. He had like Storm Fiends and Kadai, the smaller ones, not the big guy, Fireborn or whatever they are. And giants, you know, the Vermin Lord that summons the giant rats. And oh man, it was a great time. He had Ungor. It was a wonderful smattering of across chaos, and he piloted it to 5th place. So way to go, Doom. Absolutely. A little golf clap. I always like to see people running very unusual armies and doing well. You know what I mean? Where they clearly he put a lot of thought into each piece of his own little, he took the Legos and instead of making the thing that it said on the box, he went, nah, and just built his own thing. I like when people.
Has he always played mixed chaos, has he?
Not always. Doom does a lot of mixed chaos. He's done it off and on, but I mean, I think there's a lot of different armies he likes, but yeah, it's a good call out. I like the mixed chaos.
Cool.
As a fan of a sort of mixed chaos myself, I'm especially particular to this one. I like it more than mixed order. Mixed order is just like, here's a reason to shove some phoenixes into things. But that's fine.
Yeah. Keep the phoenix hate real.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we can all join in together on that. So okay. But let's turn to some pick of the week. So gentlemen, what would you like to share with the audience? What do you want to boost the signal on, podcast, video, etc.? What have you been watching this week?
So there's a new one that's come out. They've started recently called Northern Invasion. So in our small country, we have Scotland, we have England and Wales, and
Ireland.
Yeah. and we don't like to travel much. You know, whenever you listen to American podcasts or whatever, we drove 14 days to get to this tournament. You know, if we have to go more than an hour, we are very upset. So Scotland has got its sort of own thing going on in a way, hasn't it? They have their own tournaments, they have their own rankings, and the guys in the Northern Invasion, talk about all stuff like that. And I guess I want to focus on it because it's something that we're going to a bit, aren't we? Like, we're going to make the time, make sure we go up and play in these events and that as well, because a lot of them get skipped over in some ways because a lot of the time they clash with bigger famous ones that people know. So, and they've run, from what I can see, great events, have done for years, and we want to get out to some of them as well. So
so the Scottish scene is really sweet, and the Northern Invasion podcast is representative of the Scottish scene and the very north of England scene to an extent. So it's the podcasts are really good listen. they just did a good episode on like combos for artifacts and realms and heroes and little combo things you can pull off. And I don't think anyone at any level of play notices every combo. There was stuff in their podcast. I was like, oh yeah, I'd not thought of doing that. That was an interesting idea. So yeah, it's a good podcast.
Nice. I dig it. I've heard they run just a ton of events up there.
Yeah.
Like just absolutely like a scene with like a very hot scene right now. So that's great. Very cool. All right. I'll link that down in the show notes. For myself, my shout out this week is going to be to a friend of the show, Heywo Twitch, who I think is in the chat, but who recorded a very long, almost basically 2-hour show that's all about, I'll call it like getting started with AOS from a point of view of he goes through and describes each army in detail. He has like a little fluff section up front where he describes what their story is. He talks about the models that they consist of, the rules they consist of, how they play on the table, strengths, weaknesses, all sorts of things like the problems. What are your, and then like, what do you auto win against and these kinds of things. And he really gets into a lot of detail, breaks down everything, and makes a lot of great references throughout. He and I found, have a very similar reference base. So I appreciated very deeply many of his references. And his army descriptions, I feel the GW marketing department needs to just actually steal wholesale. Because like when he describes what an army is like the sort of theme and flavor of an army, they sound amazing. So this is what it needs. It needs to be like that from now on. So check that out. Worth it if you're an experienced player or not. Go ahead.
Sounds brilliant.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. I actually started watching it when he tweeted it last week for about 3 minutes and then got sidetracked with work and never finished it. So I actually did click play at one point. Ironically, I got started on it.
There you go. You're contributing to that YouTube stat we all fear, which is the minutes watched stat going down.
Yeah. See, it's a correlation with no causation. I didn't click off because I didn't like it.
Exactly. Yep. Absolutely. There you go. All right. So let's move to some hobby time. So, gentlemen, what are you working on? I can see some stuff in the background. Do I see a Renegade box in the background there?
Yeah, that's actually like 3 projects ago. The Renegade box, which is, I don't know, 2 months.
Sure. Nightmare.
So my Age of Sigmar army is.
What's this project in?
That's
this one hasn't been open. It's been here for about 4 weeks of podcasting.
That's more death models. Yeah.
Oh.
So my death army that I primarily play in tournaments is commission painted.
Okay.
I've only recently started painting.
Okay.
Or trying. So my army's commission painted, so I don't really do anything with my Age of Sigmar stuff. So most of the stuff I do right now is things that interest me hobby-wise as a learning tool. So I do jump around between armies a little bit, largely with 40k armies because I've got enough Age of Sigmar stuff. But most of my stuff is me trying to learn things, watching people's videos, watching some of your stuff, Vince, as well, and just trying techniques that I would like to have a go of, really. So the army behind me is a Tau army for 40k.
Nice. Oh yeah.
Sorry.
It's like it's
a sub-assembled Riptide and some battle suits. So I actually started painting with airbrushing because I was terrible with a brush, and
it's a wonderful tool.
Easier. So I've wanted to paint something orange for a while.
Okay.
Like I like the color. I like the idea of it. So I just, after listening to Byron's seminar at Facehammer about speed painting and also seeing a couple of tutorials that like made me think, I decided to get some nice big flat surface robots to paint some orange onto. So that's what I'm working on at the minute.
That's awesome. So is Byron the one that has the orange like chaos army?
No,
like he has the fiends, or who is that?
Byron's got the mixed order Phoenix's army.
That's right. Okay, yeah. His looks, that Phoenix army is amazing looking. It's great.
Yeah, all his finished ones are fantastic, aren't they? Like, so I know he's got various, he seems to have a lot of it. There's all sorts of stuff that looks like it's part of that army as you walk around Element Games in the cabinet. So
yeah, it's all blue.
It's all blue. Yeah.
What about yourself, Richie? What are you working on?
I've not been doing a lot in the last couple of weeks. We're opening a cafe in the shop at the minute, so it's taking up quite a bit of my time. But the immediate thing that I actually really need to get started now is I want to work on a display board for my Sylvanas army for tournaments now. And we've got Blood and Glory coming up, and it's a bit of part of the paint and scores. So it's a way to it's part of the paint and scores. It's a way to make sure you get max points. So I'm going to do that, and also just to display my army. You know, I think it's quite good. I've had it nominated before, so I want to give myself a little bit more of an edge in these paint competitions against all these other excellent painters who are going all out and making sure they're ticking every box and showing their armies off. So I'm going to work on that, and I'm going to work on the bases of them as well, because I don't think I do very good basing with my armies. I just don't think they look real. Like sometimes I look at some people's stuff and I'm like, how does that look like? I could have just walked past that in the woods, and mine looks like I put sand and a tuft on the base. No, I'm not a bad hobbyist either, so I think that's something I can improve on. So I've got an idea to cover them with leaves and tie everything that's underneath together a little bit, and sort of hide it, but maybe hopefully make it look a bit more realistic. So I'm going to go back, do that, and get a display board and tie it all together. And hopefully, you know, maybe get it nominated at some of these events I'm coming up to. Got the Grand Tournament, Blood and Glory, yeah, a few others. So
nice, very nice. Yeah, I just finished up a display board myself quite recently, and I have a bone to pick with all of you in the UK for cursing us with this pox of display bases or display boards that we have to do now. Like, I don't know who started this trend, but I would like, if I could like Back to the Future, go back in time and tackle them when they first had the idea, I would certainly fire up that DeLorean in a heartbeat. I get no joy. I love hobbying, and it's my main enthusiasm, I would say. But I have a deep well of hatred in my heart for display boards and for the arms race that has occurred with this craft project of like, I saw, I don't remember whose it was, so I apologize, but I saw somebody working on a display board earlier today on Twitter where they were using like the Arcane Ruins and the Mausoleum set and had built it together into this like massive vertical walk-through cemetery garden thing. And I was just like, my brain melted out my ears a little. And I can't handle it.
Yeah, I know.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And if I'm judging painting when I'm going around, you know, picking my favorite painted, doesn't even come into it for me. I ignore it, and I ignore over the top basing to some degree as well. You know, I like to see things technically painted well, and whatever little tricks you want to pull to draw my eye to your army, it's not really for me. Like I'm doing it because, like you say, arms race, keeping up with the Joneses. You know.
To some extent, that actually comes into when we're going to talk about soft scores, I guess, in a little bit.
Yeah,
there's a problem in there as well. I think personally, I guess
I don't know where.
We're going to get into that. Yeah, we'll talk about it. The people right now in the chat are pushing back that display boards are a U.S. original creation. I think some people, I don't know where they're from. I haven't done the research. Whomever started this thing, like I love over the top basing, like on the model itself. I have no problem with that. I love when people go over the top on their base because it's part of the model. It's probably not visible. It's not. That's okay. Like right here, there is a big ridiculous base I'm working on for my knight right now. I like stupid bases that are over the top and ridiculous. But the display board, it's very hard to transport. You mentioned like the travel in the US, right? Like if I'm going to drive 7 hours and I have to pack a car full, transporting this like 3 foot tall by 2 foot by 2 foot thing. And like, then I have to store it in my house somewhere. And, you know, I'm only going to use like an army for a year, right? Yeah. Before I like, I do an army a year as a big project. Like, I don't know what to do with those things once I'm done. I've made this like model train board effectively. And now I've got to figure out what to do with this thing. I got to go buy a storage unit just to store old display bases or display board. Sorry.
It's a logistical nightmare. Like, you know, tournaments can be a logistical nightmare anyway. Like, you know, a car can only handle 2 people half the time with suitcases and army cases. And then you've got to throw in display boards as well.
I like this year Blood and Glory though in his paint and scoring. You don't have to have one. Like you can get max without it, you know. So that's cool.
And last year you needed one.
Yeah, you needed one.
Yeah. So, but here they are. This isn't display board chat, but nonetheless, sorry to go down that rabbit hole with you guys. It's just like, oh, triggered. All right. So anyway, no, that sounds cool. Do you have some good concepts for what you're working on, like with your display board? You know, you have a vision in mind you're aiming toward?
I do have an idea. I want to do, you know, like a waterfall, like the inside of the waterfall though. So like you've passed through it and you're in the cave inside, like the Goonies type thing or whatever. So you'd be looking at like the cave walls and the waterfall, but you're in it.
Yes,
that's what I want to try and do. I might be a little bit ambitious, but
I'm learning how to get my paint smooth. That's my level of hobby right now.
That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody is at their own point in their hobby journey. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That's perfectly fine. But that does sound ambitious. I'm not gonna lie. That sounds pretty ambitious.
Yeah,
sounds awesome.
Like some hidden survival. I think what inspired me was when I was listening to some of the Realms War stuff. There was when the Stormcast first find the Sylvaneth, they're like hidden. Ariel's got them like hidden under the world or in some hidden garden, and then the Stormcast lead Nurgle to them. And Ariel's like, "Why have you let Nurgle here, you idiots?" We're like, "Well, we're here to help." It's like, I don't need your help. Just stay out.
You're not helping.
Garden. And you've shown Nurgle how to come here. So yeah, I think that's where it's come from. You know, that idea of them like being hidden away somewhere, hiding. So yeah,
I dig that. No, that's cool. Yes, those dum-dums that led Nurgle straight into Alariel. Yeah, but whatever. All's well that ends well, I guess. So there you go.
Didn't end well for Nurgle when Ariel got annoyed. So
I would just like to point out that now the comments have turned to a discussion of who's to ultimately be to blame for this display board situation, as there's lots of talk as to where it did. I'll have to do some sort of like anthropological research into like the first appearance of display board, somebody.
It's probably some Games Workshop store manager somewhere 20 years ago come up with the armies on parade idea. And then, you know, his area manager's been like, this is an amazing idea at some meeting. And the whole bloody company's gone around and done armies on parade weekends at their local stores.
Well, that was exactly my thought of where it came from. That's why I assumed that, because I assumed it came from armies on parade, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of where it had started. But that was
Realm of Battle board, stick an army on it.
Yeah. So who knows? Lost to the mists of time, probably. But here we are. Whatever the original source, now we're all here making giant model train craft projects as though, you know, but in very small form. Okay. My hobby time. Oh, what am I working on? Oh, yeah, that's right. That's what we were talking about.
Yeah. What are you working on?
I'm working on a robot. So he obviously doesn't have his shell on right now. His shell is over there. And it's all the freehand is done. All my weathering is done. And now we've got to get to the outer metallic parts on the shell. But I love this dude. I think this guy's fun. You know, I've got all my little missiles. I've got my little nuclear symbol. Where's it at? There you go.
Yeah.
Got my little nuclear symbol on my missiles and stuff. All those kinds of things. Yeah. Yeah, we've got serious missiles. Exactly. We go all the way with them. But all my knights are Sisters of Battle knights. So that's what we're working on there. Inquisition / Sisters Knights. So that one should be done this week. It's been a long road. These nights are always like, you know, I don't know, 120 to 150 hour projects. So they're not a quick thing. But I'm really happy with this one. I like the new knight frame, and I really like this giant harpoon thing. That's it's a sweet looking gun / weapon, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. Gun seems off, but nonetheless.
That's looking great.
It's funny how they managed to make the absolute best models they make always have the absolute worst stats in game. They managed to do it with 40k all the time. Everything in your army that you want to play for aesthetic reasons is bad on the table. I don't know how they do it.
I'm very fortunate in that regard because 40K for me is a complete sort of basement garage game. I don't play it competitively in any way. It's a game that my group gets together and plays about like once a month. And we do very much like beer and pretzels, non-competitive games. So it's just take whatever you like. So we can, it's liberating because we just literally, it's everybody running the models they like. Yeah. Right. And we usually do multiplayer games too, which also then further like reduces down the competitiveness level because when 4 people are at the table just playing chaos ball, you know, like whatever.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything can be good in a game where 4 people are all blowing each other up, you know, so.
Ian didn't mean to call you out for your bad weapon choice on the night, by the way, then, you know, it's fine. You can play, you can do your hobby how you like.
I mean, my night.
No, it's fine.
My night that you might be able to see is in exactly the same state as yours. He's got no shell on.
Yeah.
Mine didn't take 150 hours. Mine took 150 nanoseconds or something. I don't know. And he's similar. He's not armed with anything competitive. Just so we're clear.
It's all good.
Yeah.
I do not run from the fact that I make bad choices in my models very often. I'm okay with that. You know, I have like I mentioned, like I do 1 army a year. In my like competitive army I'm going to take to tournaments, I actually think about that kind of stuff, right? And try to make sure that I'm modeling it in the way that's going to be beneficial. For everything else I work on, you know, that's just like whatever. I'm doing that for fun. So who cares? I mean, I owned 3 cockatrices before Beasts of Chaos came out. Right. So that should level set where I'm at. Okay. Like that's the kind of like level I'm participating in here. There's not many worse choices. Here you go. I have 13 giants. I've mentioned this on the show before, but like,
wow.
Nice. So you can see a bunch of them in this case right here. That's like,
you can fit them all in an army now.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, absolutely. The worst army in history, but it would be an army.
Yeah.
Just an army that fails like an outsized number of its own charges every round for no reason. But this is not another Vince complaints about giants talk. I've done that for every show the last like 4 shows. All right.
There's nothing better than just picking up a model you like and just getting stuck in some painting. Is there no pressure what tournament you're going to go to? I need this model. I need this model. I'm just going to sit down this weekend or however long it takes you and just paint a model you really enjoy. So.
Yeah, I find it's a good way to celebrate after you finish that tournament army.
Yeah.
Right, definitely. Like the pressure's off. So you're like, cool, I'll do a small fun project or 2. Yeah. Right. Like that's
My 40K is all my release stuff. All my 40K is my fun stuff. I never finish the projects I start. I paint something different. I learn something from it. I get bored of doing another project. That's my fun stuff when I'm not thinking about, you know, optimizing one more tiny thing in an Age of Sigmar list.
Yeah,
really. So.
Right. Yep. All right. So as usual, we hope that you out there are working on something, that you're using this opportunity to fight the war against the gray and get some stuff painted while we're chit-chatting. So hopefully you're working on your hobby time as well. But gentlemen, I think it's time to turn to our feature topic. We're going to talk about the tournament meta, tournament scene, rules, all that kind of stuff. The meta tournament meta, the meta. Super meta. That's what we're all about today. I feel like if I would have named the show the meta of tournaments, people wouldn't really get the joke, but that's okay. So let's start with a high level view. And I thought it'd be fun. Turn the mic over to you guys and just say, you know, what do you think of the tournament scene right now? You know, where it's at and the trajectory we're on. Like, what's your overall feelings, high level view?
Okay.
So I think it is brilliant. It seems to me that it's in one of the best places for any Games Workshop game ever.
Yeah.
I think there are lots of ways in which it could get better.
Yeah.
And I guess that's probably the high level summary. It's really fantastic. It's lovely to see Games Workshop are making great efforts, although we don't agree with all of them necessarily, are making great efforts to actually do things in the tournament scene, which they've never done before.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's like so much diversity out there, so many massive events. Everyone's selling out their events everywhere in the world quicker than they can find places to put them. You know, like, and balance in Age of Sigmar, although balance, you know, none of these games will ever be that balanced. it's massively diverse in the armies people are playing. Obviously, we think there's lots of things that could be done better, but you know,
we play the game out the book.
Yeah,
like that's one of my favorite things from it. We all, whatever score and whatever else goes on, we basically pretty much all just play the rules of the game. You know, not too much comp really. You know, there's a whole realm thing's the only thing that comes into it. But
as opposed to 40k, where everything is, you know, made of house rules.
Yeah, don't even have missions that you can use. You know, they've got the missions that are in the books. They're all pretty much all great. You play them all as they are. Yeah. So I think the overview of it is brilliant. Yeah, like what you said. Yeah. Turn out great for them.
And you know, I like to take every opportunity when we get asked this question to say how much we both absolutely adore this. And we absolutely adore the work that Games Workshop and the team are doing. And as much as it might come across that we're slamming or slating stuff a lot of the time, it's because we love it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we wouldn't put.
And sometimes it goes a lot against some of the established people who've done it for a long time, don't they? Because we've come in with new eyes in a way. So yeah, but yeah, we still love it all.
Yeah, yeah. Top and bottom, brilliant, and we are keen to see it continue to evolve.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I felt like this was a really, for the reason you hit the nail like on the head so hard, and I want to second it, that one of the reasons I really wanted to start here is because I'm in the same place. I think the tournament scene is going amazing. I love the growth. Players are generally having a fun time. Like when I'm at events, it's mostly smiling faces. Right? Yeah. Happy people who are having a good time. You watch tournaments happen all over the world, and it's just people walking out saying how much fun they had. I see a diversity of armies and lists I don't know that I've ever seen. Certainly not in old Warhammer Fantasy, where it was usually like you could pick the top 3 armies that were going to be in like pole position 2 and 3 more or less every time. But even beneath like the army diversity, the list diversity, like different takes within the same army is incredible. I agree with you. It's never going to be perfectly balanced. I don't care. I don't need that. Like as long as there's a lot of different things people can take and enjoy, great. Then I feel like we're in a pretty good place. And I agree with you, especially that we wouldn't be talking about ways we think it can improve if we didn't love it. Right. Yeah. I'm not talking about ways. I don't have a show where I talk about ways to improve. I don't know, ping pong. Right, or something. It's nothing against ping pong. It's just like I don't care about ping pong. It's not a thing I play. Maybe there are ways to improve international, professional, competitive ping pong. I don't know. Could be. But I know nothing about it, and I don't care. And I don't care to recommend any improvements, right? But I care about this. So all of this will, and even when we have differences in opinion amongst ourselves as we go forward in this, which we will have, the reality is we're both operating from the same starting point and goal, right? That we think things are on the whole pretty good right now, and we just want to see them get better, right? So, okay. The book comment is very well taken too. My God. Oh my God. So many years of tournaments and Warhammer Fantasy battles where it's like somehow we had a 300-page book and then we needed another like tome of comp on top of that. Like, how did we find ourselves in that situation? It's amazing that that's how the world we lived in worked. But here we are. Okay. So real quick then, if you had to sort of let's lay out some initial thoughts. You know, you said there's some ways you want to see it improve. Let's say the next, I don't know, 1 to 3 years. Okay. What are the things you'd like to see that you think would give a marked improvement in the tournament scene overall?
Consistency across events. With the small amount of comp that goes on.
So primarily, you know, playing in the realms or out of them, either one would be fine. But Games Workshop have said their vision is to play in the realms. So, you know, it'd be great if that became a standard rather than an on and off switch.
Yeah.
The realms being maybe just fixed a little bit, you know, like Realmscape features being having, you know, it would, we said on our podcast that we recorded earlier today, Games Workshop are doing great things, but the one thing they're not doing is reverting stuff that they've maybe done that's not great. Like they are still sticking to their story that gear happened on purpose, right? They're still saying that we designed and play tested this and we don't see anything wrong with it, where I don't think anyone I've ever spoken to on any side of any fence thinks that is in any way viable outside the narrative play. So, it'd be great to see them go, all right, here's the new gear rules.
Yeah.
That's a thing I would love to see in a real errata. I've forgotten how I got onto this topic now. Like
we talk about consistency in events.
Consistency in the realms, and Games Workshop making inroads to fixing that thing so that people play it consistently. And then I think the other big thing for us, which is obviously the thing we've become accidental champions of or whatever, is tournament scoring, for reasons of consistency, and also because we think it would be better.
I think it'd be modernized. We think people are still running from, an old stance on it, maybe without the software and support that they needed to do things properly in the past. And I think we've got caught in a bit of a trap with it, really, and we could change a lot of that.
Yeah, that's where we'd like to see it go. I think, we feel to some extent that some of the viewpoints that people hold around things like soft scores are just a result of the fact that they are tradition, rather than because they're necessarily good. And we would love to see those things start to evolve into a more modern, as Games Workshop evolve into making their games better, and making inroads into trying to do things that positively impact the way it's played. We like to see events catch up with that and stop adding things on top.
Yeah, we think that the game has got so much variance in every match already that you don't need tournaments to come up with their own set of rules to make the game feel different for some reason. Between like all the armies, so many of them being playable, that we've already said, so many of them being playable in so many different ways. The realms, what realm you can play in, what mission you can play in, with more and more missions. I think there's enough out there that no two games of Age of Sigmar are going to be the same. I think there's in what they've put together already. Now they're adding this layer of secondaries on as well, which is giving you something else, maybe, well, it is something else that makes it different. How good it is another matter. But 3 years down the line, I don't know.
Age of Sigmar Grand Championship Tournament, Las Vegas 2021.
Yeah, I think it lacks coverage a bit. Do you think, like, live coverage? I quite enjoy that sometimes. I know, like, obviously, like you mentioned, Robbie's doing a bit more of that as an independent person. There's only really Games Workshops people I ever watch anyway. I know the odd tournament has some. I quite like that type of thing as well. So
yeah.
Okay.
Nice to see more.
There's a lot. I like a lot of those ideas, and I don't like a lot of those ideas. But that was a great overview of, I think, where like you charted an excellent path through some discussion we can have here, because I think this is a lot of where we can sort of plumb out kind of this discussion. So the one I want to start with is let's deep dive on a little standardization versus differentiation, right? So when you say standardization, and I had made a comment previously, I'll stake out my initial position on this. My position is twofold. One, I hate standardization as a concept, and two, I don't think we need it because we already have it. It's called the General's Handbook. So that's my initial staked position. But before I try to die on this hill, I want to make sure I understand, because that could be completely wrong-headed. I want to hear what, like, you guys kind of got into it. What do you see as actually being standardized? Like, is it just, well, okay, we're using these realm rules, and these are some interpretations on some things, like, say, volume use and vertical measurement or stuff like that? Like, is that what we're talking about? That sort of almost like the refinement of just the, let's call it the 1% edges, and then maybe the packs of things that are used like realms. Is that really the only move you're suggesting with standardization?
Well, yeah, realms is the main one, right? Because it's not standard by any stretch right now.
No, it's fully optional right now. A lot of people are using them, but they themselves have said, and I think a lot of TOs see them as, like, for example, the distinction between, like, do you use the realms and all the realm spells, or just the realms, or whatever? And then even if we say we're using the realms, there's a lot of questions we haven't answered yet, right? Like, how are we using the realms? Are they set to each match? Do you literally decide at the table? Yeah. What can you get out of them? What spells are available? Like, there's still a lot of hidden stuff under that, right?
So that's a big one. That's probably that's the biggest rules wise in AOS standardization that needs to happen. I think the other thing that we're keen on standardizing, and also where it stops, is the stuff that is a common denominator between every tournament you go to. Every tournament you go to, you play some games of Age of Sigmar. They are scored. Someone wins based on a score, and then there are then you get to the things with things like erratas that Games Workshop have not gotten round to yet as well. So I firmly believe that the way they do it in 40k is if a rule is written completely incorrectly, they will play it that way until the Games Workshop change it. And I firmly believe that as adults, we are more than capable of fixing those problems. But the reason they don't bother fixing them is because you don't know how different tournaments are going to do it. And I think the AOS scene is still young enough that we can still stop that before it happens. Okay. So, as an example, when Age of Sigmar version 2 come out, everyone knew that there was issues with things like Seraphon summoning, with things like command ability stacking, and all of the events almost when Age of Sigmar came out before the FAQ, all FAQ'd those things themselves in almost identical ways. And I think there are still some things in the game that very few that could do with that right now, and that would also be a good standardization to apply. An obvious one is we don't use gear when we play realms. That would be an obvious thing that we would all agree on. So really, realms, tournament scoring, which is the most controversial one.
Yep.
And a very small subset of very needed erratas.
Yeah,
I think
if you go back to the realm one, we think that. Well, I'm going to speak both of cut in if you think I'm wrong here or anything, but that you want to come to the tournament or in the build up to the tournament and your preparation for the tournament, knowing that you're going to be playing in however many rounds there are. Let's say there's 5, and 5 of the 7 realms. Probably not beasts in its current form, so we could just take that out or take the command ability out, but maybe just leave it. You are preparing to play in all those realms with everything turned on, the command abilities, all the spells, the realmscapes either off.
That's the thing that needs standardizing as well, is how we play those.
Yeah, I think off. I'd rather just not see them in. I think they're a little bit unnecessary. Bloat. They are too much for people who maybe don't play in like a tournament every month, or play some people only play Warhammer in a tournament once every couple of months, right? They'll have the odd knock around with the friends. I think it's a bit too much for that chunk of the field. So I'd rather just see them off, or determined in advance, and communicated to you in the rules pack. Okay. And that all 18 missions are on, I guess, although I prefer only the back 12. Like, I don't think the first 3 are necessary in the core rulebook. I think they're a bit too much of a repeat of the ones that are in the first 6. Sorry, a bit too much of a repeat of the ones that are General's Handbook 2017.
But that's comp. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that we would never want to say standardize on, because that's a personal opinion.
Yeah. So all 18 missions, and you're coming to the tournament and you're preparing to play in that. Now, the TO can say every round I'm going to roll a dice and we're going to do whatever. I don't care if he picks every mission he wants to play. I don't care if he picks every realm he wants to play and whatever ones he thinks should be and shouldn't be used. Like, we don't use, Hish because the command ability is amazing. He's going to keep that out of the 5 that he's going to play. Just let us prepare to face them all. Right?
Yeah. I would go one further than that and say, I want to be able to build an army and paint models and assemble models that I know will be effective for the next 12 months in tournaments, because they're all the same tournament.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to say, I need a different army for this event because it's realms. I need to change models for this event because it's not realms. Yeah, that's really frustrating as well.
Yeah, definitely. We did a whole episode on it today talking about the next few tournaments that are coming up, switching to realms, and how it's going to change what we're going to play, what we're going to build and collect and stuff like that. So that's what I want from the standardized thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the stuff in there that, so it's always tough. I mean, and we should obviously preface this with all of this is just our discussion about, sort of how we think about this, because the reality is standardization at a level that would be like actual true standardization is, I'm not going to say impossible, but that's an asymptote. It's pretty darn close to, because tournaments are by their very nature self-run things, right? Everybody's a king. Now there can be every TO is a king and decides what they want to do. They can just blow it out or not. And ultimately it's a completely sort of capitalistic market-driven enterprise, right? If they craft their own set of rules and they say, I can have 40 people and 40 people show up and that funds the event, they can run that forever, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine. The market has spoken. That's what people like, So, and I would never want to override that. Like I'm always wary of sort of top-down direction when people are making decisions that are obviously serving a market need, right? So now don't
you think that there is enough other ways for a TO to make their event unique than we're in Realms or not?
Sure. Yes, but at the same time, if they decide,
there's so much more that they can do to make their event attractive, really.
Oh yeah, and I think that's probably actually like the short pole in the tent as far as drawing people's interest, right? Like I don't think that's actually usually that big of a deal to folks.
Yeah.
But if they feel it is, I'm not going to be the one to tell them it's not. You know what I mean? Like I'm not the one putting in the hours of collecting and painting all the terrain and hustling to get all the people to sign up and organizing everything. Like, hey, you put in the time, you get to do the crime. You know what I mean? Like again, but yes, I do agree with you that like I don't suppose probably a lot of tournament goers go, oh, you're using the realm spells, I'm not going to that, or you're not using the realm spells, I'm not going to that. You know what I mean? Like yeah. I'm sure they look at it and go, okay, that's interesting. Because I don't like, you mentioned like list changing in response to sort of the presence or absence of some of these features. And like, yeah, that's fair. Because certainly the presence or absence of some of these things are going to change a list. I don't disagree with that, or could, I should say, right? But at the same time, so does everything change your list that's in the meta. Like, I think you're starting from a faulty premise there of an army that's going to work for the next 12 months. And what I mean by that is just like in the next 12 months, there's going to be some number of armies that hit. There'll probably be some erratas that come out. Those armies might dramatically shift the meta and so hence change completely what you want to play with. The number of like other things that the TO could also decide, aside from everything we've talked about, like they could have standardized scoring and realm application, and they could then still do other things that completely change the lists you want to use or run. Your local scene could see an influx of Stormcast suddenly in your local meta, and like your list just drops against high armor, right? So you decide you need to make a change there. So there's a lot more factors would be my argument than just that standardization. Like moving to that doesn't suddenly grant you like, oh, I now have this list that's good for 12 months.
Yeah, but like there's things that are in your control and things that are out of your control, right? And what Games Workshop release or what armies people switch to is always completely uncontrollable. But
sure.
we know for a fact that tournaments will or will not use realms. And we know, I guess, to take the premise one step further back, if there is no standardization in realms, we know for a fact that we're going to have to continually change our army. Yeah. Whereas whether you change your army based on the way the meta changes with what people play may or may not happen.
Do you think there's a challenge there though? Because I would argue that there's only a small subset of the tournament population that would be contextually sensitive enough to make major changes to their list based on the presence or absence of certain realms and or realm rules. What I mean by that is certainly both of you would. You've just stated as such. I take you at your word. But I think there are also a lot of players who would just go, nah, this is my army and I'll deal with it, right? Like, or who at the same time, are you painting directly to 2K? Right? Because I don't. I mean, my army, my armies are generally like 3,000, 3,500 points, So like changing a list is just taking something different out of the case. It's not like it's that big a deal.
Yeah. So I guess it depends. I guess it depends on how far you've gotten, but that's a consideration in whatever you're doing. But for me, like I've got a 2,000 point army ready, and then like the meta's changed, or I've played my army and learned more about it and this kind of stuff, and now I'm playing in realms as well, and I need to change my list. So yeah, like it won't always be a thing, and once you hit critical mass of 4,000 points, maybe it's less of an issue. But not everyone can afford 4,000 points. Not everyone wants to upfront paint or build 4,000 points. Like most people I know, at least, build the 2,000 points. When they start a new army, they map out the 2,000 points and they build it.
Yeah,
they might change it a little bit, but they very rarely go to 4,000 unless they've collected it for a long time.
Sure.
What I go back to is that Games Workshop have stated how they intend realms to be used, in match play and what have you, and their intent is that they're used, right? And obviously, when we talk about standardization and having them all the same and using realms, probably the biggest thing that we get, obstacle that people bring up is that they don't want all tournaments to be the same. People say that quite a lot, right? It'll just be the same. We'll play the same, the same armies would be the best for X amount of time without, some intervention. But for all the reasons you've just said as well, that Games Workshop release loads of new stuff, it changes everything,
right.
when they come out with these new armies. And everything I've just said already about how much variation there is in the game already, I just don't think that there's a reason to not follow their vision, really.
Why do we need to vary it by turning the rules on and off when it varies already?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because if
to what's made Age say more great in my opinion, and what attracted me to it so much, and that we play the game out the book. I just love that. So little comp. I just don't think it's needed to, balance anything, or some balance things maybe, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see the challenge of like certain things staying static at the top of the list. We're well away from that Warhammer fantasy world, right? Things that are good change all the time because of the speed of releases, and by the way, that doesn't just mean new armies, right? Like just the speed of new things in general into the game. Like as we see different endless spells come out for old armies, or a thing that just gets a book, or they release some other supplement. Like there's tons of stuff they do
every year, don't we? There's loads. So
yeah. I'm not really worried about like that because I've said I don't like static. I am against a static thing. But that being said, that's why I said I'm not ready to die on that hill until I understood you, because the reality is if we said, hey, let's just play it with the realms because that's what people want to do, or that's what, Games Workshop has said, and that's part of the book. And let's have a sort of the core set of agreed errata. That's the part I find the least controversial, right? Like I'm completely with you on that one. In fact, when I helped work with Chuck to create the US like tournament organizers pack, and one of the things that we did in there was offer an errata to commonly sort of these common situations, right? Of like, here is a set pack of errata we would recommend that you use, right? That's the kind of thing that I think actually benefits highly to everybody from consistency, right? Because then that an interpretation on a rule has a consistency across the board, right? So like, there's no disagreement for me on that one. The realms, I'm not sure. Like, that's fine. If they were, I wouldn't hate it. It's fine. If they're not, I'm not sure that I'm not sure I care either way. So if every TO individually got together and was just like, hey, we're all going to use realms, guys and gals, and that was the decision, I'd be like, okay, cool. That sounds good. That sounds like the new standard to me, and I'm down with that. But let's move to but there's the challenge with this is then there's a whole layer above this, right? So we'll leave scoring out for a minute because we're going to have a fun time digging through that one. But there's a whole layer of differentiation above and beyond this, right?
Yeah.
Of how they set it up and how they choose to implement it. Maybe they have grudges. Maybe they have different sorts of ways that people move about on the tables. Maybe they have different other rules that are interacting and coming up. And I'm not necessarily even talking about narrative events, right? Where like if you've got a Neo event, obviously all bets are off, right? Because that's like we've blown the doors off of this.
Yeah.
So understandably, I am assuming, by the way, that we're restricting our conversation to what I would call like a traditional match play competitive event, not a sort of Neo event. A narrative event, do whatever you like. That's the whole point of it, right? You're trying to tell an individual story.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
And they are really cool by looks of things as well. Yeah. Like some of the stuff people do for them is brilliant. Like, not my cup of tea, not something I'd be able to have enough time, unfortunately, to dedicate to go to, but they are amazing,
Yeah, it's a totally different experience.
Right?
Yeah, it's a like dictating standardization across that is insane. That would be like dictating standardization across, fictional novels that get written. Like that's, that's not the point of this, guys.
Yeah.
So I trot that out just to make sure that nobody thinks we mean that, right? Just so we're being clear about our assumptions. Yeah. But what about those other elements? Because TOs still have a large amount of leverage, even if you say that. Do you worry about non-standard elements like that and how those would then influence? Because I could see those also having, like, most TOs slap some stuff like that around. How does that then influence your decision making or your thoughts about this?
I think as part of the things that we say we would like to see standardized, obviously that comes with the caveat of we also expect that you're not going to add any more house rules in. Like the document that we've written that we keep threatening to release and keep flip-flopping over actually starts by saying this document is written from the stance of no house rules or absolute minimum house rules. So whenever there is a ambiguity in something, we're going to go with what Games Workshop's vision is. So as we said before, realms or no realms, we don't care. Like, we could take or leave any of it, but there is a standard. Games Workshop have got one, so we use it. And I think along with our standardizations that we think would benefit, we also think no house rules is a good standardization as well. So, certainly I think as far as the rules of the game go, which is mostly outside of scoring, mostly all we're trying to do is let's agree on a common use of the rules of the game. And that includes not modifying them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this one's an interesting one because this is probably the one where there's the most delta between us. That is to say, like, I actually enjoy, I think, outside of, and again, we're not talking about standardized errata or something here, but I actually enjoy when TOs in various events will put their thumb on the scale in a way. And shape the way that they want their tournament to be played and have a unique identity to it. I would say I'm not interested in any kind of like circuit or turning this into an esport or becoming Magic or anything like that. I think there is a value actually to idiosyncrasy in this regard. And again, I can vote and everybody else can vote with their dollar. If they go too far afield and nobody shows up, well, they're out of business, right? There is no tournament.
When you say idiosyncrasies and TOs putting their own sort of stamp on things, what are you talking about as an example?
Sure. Let's yeah, it's a good question. Let's make it real, right? Okay. So the way that they run each round is they're going to use the realms, right? But they're going to what they're going to do is they're going to have each table is going to have its own realm, and the players are going to randomly generate the realm feature when they sit up at the table, right? And that's going to be based on that individual sort of element. And they're going to have some kind of other secondary rule that fires on that table at certain points in time during the game that could be impactful of the way the game is played. Okay. Think of them like a secondary realmscape feature or something occurring during that. Okay. Now, what I've described is probably a smaller tournament, right? Because if we're going to get down to the table level, we're probably in like the 30 to 40 or 50 or 60 person tournament here. We're going to get too big to do that kind of idiosyncrasy at that level. Yeah. So there's an example, right? So something like that, where they're trying to make it very much where the realms have a stronger impact on the game, right? They want to turn up the realm effect. They say not only are we using them, they're going to be very idiosyncratic in how they work, and you're not going to be able to plan for it completely because you don't know what realmscape feature you're going to have first or midway through, right?
Yeah. Like the first half of what you said, like every table is going to have its own realmscape, randomly generated, etc., etc. That fits firmly within what we do. Like it's just using the rules of the game. How you allocate the realms is not massively different to how you allocate the battle plan and so on. You could make an argument that different people playing different realms in the same round affects the rounds, but equally that's no different than pairings between armies.
Yeah, for what matchup you get exactly.
Yeah, so all that is fine. That fits within the standardization. Like as Richie said, if people want to pick their realms, if they want to roll for them, if they want to throw pieces of paper at people with realms, like whatever. But the second half of what you got into, for me and likely Richie, that falls firmly into what I would consider narrative gaming rather than competitive gaming.
I don't know. And that's interesting. Of course, there's probably a spectrum here, right?
Yeah. If you're going to dungeon master a game, essentially, which is awesome, that's not competitive gaming for me. That's something totally different.
Sure, no, that's fair. But I'm not saying anything that heavy. Let's admit, here you go. I'll modify the base rule. You ready? You roll like the rule as it stands with realmscape features is when you start the game, you roll a die and determine your realmscape feature, right?
Yeah.
That's the base implementation rule. Great. Here's my second rule I added. At the top of round 3, all tables will roll on the realmscape feature again. The new feature will replace the existing feature. There. We're not a narrative event. I've generated a uniform rule. Something happens. It changes midway, right? I would say I'm still a long distance away from a narrative event, but I've house ruled something. And I could, my point is that I've walked into modification of the rules. Custom scenarios is another common one, right? Where like there are these 18 scenarios, and I think they're all honestly pretty great. I have no desire to go outside of them. That is to say, like, I am perfectly happy playing the 18 book scenarios all day. I think they're fantastic. Outside of, like, again, non-narrative events. Narrative events are going to have their own scenarios by default. We all accept that. But if I saw a TO who was like, well, these are my custom scenarios. Okay, that's fine. Like, as long as they publish them in advance, I don't think I have an issue with that. All right.
Okay, yeah. So the first one you've picked, obviously, extra realm one, is.
And I purposely picked something so small and minimal.
Change, yeah. Like, I don't know what you're asking me. In some ways, I would go to that tournament still. Yeah, that wouldn't stop me going.
I mean, if you were trying to write a standardized rules pack, obviously you would be trying to talk people out of doing that.
Yeah,
because it adds a bit of complexity. But as far as that's not, as you describe it, that's not narrative play to me. That is a small modification. It's not the end of the world. Would I prefer it? Probably not. Would it bother me? Not really at all. I'd be okay with it. If realmscapes were more balanced, I would be okay with it. Let's taking the actual issues with realmscapes out of it. That sounds fine.
Yeah, by the way, just real quick, I want to touch on something you did say earlier, which was I also hope they continue to evolve the realm rules. Like, there's some of them that are a little squidgy. You had made that point that I hope we continue to see like evolution and refinement of them. Yes, 100%. Anyways, please continue. I just wanted to second that.
Sure, yeah.
What was the second part?
Custom scenarios, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that would put me off going to an event, probably. You know, depending on how bad they were. I guess.
I guess the problem with custom scenarios for me, in particular, is that again we're talking about this. You got to remember we approach these things from a competitive standpoint and quite a high, not a high level, but a sort of focused competitive standpoint. And again, I want to be able to practice stuff. And I don't want to have to take time out of my schedule of 24 events I'm going to this year to practice specifically for one Snowflake style one.
Yeah.
And that's not like because I hate custom scenarios or even because I hate the idea of doing something different. I would just rather not do that in a competitive setting. Like if I was going to, and maybe I would still go to that event if I didn't have a different event to go to. I would go to that. I wouldn't hate it or anything, but I would rather not have to say, okay, guys, this week we're going to practice this scenario.
Yeah.
And that's aside from my absolute lack of faith in anyone to playtest anything properly ever.
Yeah, no, I think going back to the first point again, it's like the realm thing. That I would look at that from, like you say, from a really competitive point of view. Like, obviously, I wouldn't really want that, but again, because of some reasons Ian mentions then. But to me, it's like the tier wants to do something fun and interesting with their game. There's a lot other stuff you could do. We're on round 3, not battle round 3, round 3 of the tournament. The first player to do whatever wins this prize. And the people who those fun things appeal to, then they can get into it. Me up there on table 1, because I'm always on table 1, never. Me, up there, I'd be like, what was that about the first person to kill a Griffhound? I don't care. Let's play on. But all the people that want those fun things to happen, they'll be right into it.
Or if you are on table 1, you want to try and do it, you can.
Yeah.
But I guess, and that's a good analogy to other things that we talk about in standardization. You can keep all these fun things, you can keep all these different things, but they don't have to be all mashed together with the actual tournament.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have to be. You can still do them. That's a good example, I think, of what you just said.
Sure. No, you're like, I think of a good example probably in your favor is something like, doesn't the achievement system or whatever run like parallel but not influence the main event? Is that right?
No, that event? That's a separate event, I think.
What do you mean? That's just
the Warhammer achievements at Blood and Glory. Is
that what you mean?
Yeah, like they don't
that's their narrative events. Pretty sure that's what it's called.
That's a narrative event. Yeah, that's
gotcha. Okay, but right, I could see. I know that like sometimes in the past, some of the Neos have had like secondary sheets that are running parallel with the tournament, but not influencing it. Right? They're literally parallel, like the true definition of parallel.
Yeah, like a bingo card. Hero.
Yeah.
You get a line, you get a prize. There's so many things that you can do to make your event fun. I guess that's going back. If that's going back to the point that the biggest obstacle we come across is people say they don't want all tournaments to be the same, and they won't be if we all just play the same set of rules. They'll all be vastly different. So,
and one thing I think was like a point that you made earlier that I think is highly cogent is we shouldn't ever just do these things completely because they're tradition. And the weight of tradition does weigh heavy on us, right? Like a lot of people have been playing and running tournaments for years and years and years. And it is good to stop and examine your assumptions, right? Because like what you just mentioned there of having this sort of side bingo cards or side things or other things that are going on, but then you sort of literally keep them parallel where they never touch, right? One doesn't influence the other. Not a lot of people I see do that. And I think there is a lot of space to explore there, right? So I think it would be like a thing that I'm definitely in your camp on is we should be exploring all sorts of interesting ways to pursue additional differentiation that don't necessarily have to touch that third rail, right? There's a lot out there. Okay. So this is good because now we've come to it. So it's time to talk about scores, folks. Tuck in. Here we go. All right. I need like that person to walk behind me with like the round card. You know what I mean?
Like, a giant hand.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So before we ever get into discussing anything about scoring, I think it's important to lay down assumptions and sort of a psychographic profiling and point of view, because I have a feeling that once we lay this out, from this all else will flow. Okay.
Yeah.
This will be the source of the river. So here's the question I have for you, gentlemen. What is the point of a Warhammer tournament? Why are we doing this? Again, non-narrative event. Like those have their own point. That's very obvious. The answer there is it's self-evident, telling a story, right? That's why you put together a narrative event. Okay, great, cool. We can push that to the side. What is the point of these competitive events, of these tournaments?
Loaded this, isn't it, eh? So can I give you 2 answers?
Well,
you can answer me however you like, buddy.
The reasons I go to an event,
yes,
in no particular order. One is to socialize and meet with a bunch of people who I like, or meet new people.
Yeah.
And play games against different people that are not in my normal circle, different armies. 2 is to play in the competitive part of the event and try to win it.
Yes.
3 is to, particularly more nowadays that I'm getting more and more into it, is to look at people's painting, talk about people's paintings, see, learn things from other people's painting. That's probably it. Yeah, social, gaming, hobby.
Couldn't agree more. I want to go and compete against other men or women in, something that I've spent a hell of my time thinking about. I want to try and see if I'm as good as I think I am and put myself up against them. That is super important. Social, massively important. I have made so many friends doing this type of thing, and I love to socialize with new random people, just great in it. Have a drink with people who you've never met before. It's always more fun in whatever setting. And wargaming's easy. You've all got something in common. And yeah, obviously the last one is to celebrate the hobby, right? It's what these have always been about. Celebrate the hobby in some degree, and in some more than others.
Yeah.
Sure. No, so this didn't go the way I thought, but I'm super glad it did go this way, because the funny part is I have no different answer. I agree with all three. Those are the 3 pillars, right? I mean, I think it's almost like the 3 pillars of these tournaments are a celebration of the hobby, the social interaction, and the skill against skill, right? The game itself, the idea that you have to test your tactical acumen in some way against your opponent on the table, right?
Yeah, and I think people put different weight in all 3 of those things. Like, I'll go.
They definitely can meet against each other, right?
Yeah, I'll go to tournaments and I'll see people drinking from 9 a.m. Right? They've literally got there. All they want to do is booze.
Right.
And then there's people who have gone to paint and compete on the painting side of things. They've gone to show off their army, which they've spent, 150 hours on a night doing, like yourself, and they've put a lot of time into it. Or there's people like us who want to go and play the game and try and win. Yeah. Right. And I think that, just there's so many different types of people that come to these things. So
okay. So we seem to be on the same page, and I agree with you. There's weighting to this, and people gain, like what we're saying is all 3 of these things are valuable, I think. And then individual people sort of bring their own value propositions to it, right? Like certain people go because it's their chance. For me, one of the true great values of going to tournaments is that there are great friends I have that maybe the 3 tournaments a year I see them, or 2 tournaments, or 1 tournament a year I see them. That's the only time I get to spend with them personally, like in person all year. Right. And that's hugely valuable. The friendships that I've made in this hobby are truly most of my best friends now, people I've known for decades because of this. Right. And I'm immensely grateful for that. There you go. That's right. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, this is that is truly one of the great and glorious things about this hobby that we should celebrate. It does bring people together. It's awesome. And then obviously for me, the hobby's a big deal. I tend to bring a lot to that. Painting is a big deal for me. It's a huge part of my life. And I certainly like competing against the table. It's fun to try to win a game. It's fun to try to win a tournament, right? Yeah, sure. But like, if I were to be like gun to my head, I had to stack rank, that competitive part comes out in 3rd place.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean I don't find it valuable. It just means sort order, like we said, something has to come out on top. Doesn't make that one thing not good or the thing in 3rd bad, right? In the same. Okay. So now let's talk about scoring. So we'll just start with this premise. I'll say, what is your ideal scoring system? So since this is part of sort of your standardization concept that we previously shuffled aside, let's bring it back in now. What's your sort of ideal scoring system? Slash set of wins or whatever. Like what does the podium look like at the end? Like, what are the podiums looking like at the end? That kind of thing.
Full detail, like to the
however deep you want to go, like whatever you feel best makes your point.
I guess in relation to the why do you go to tournaments, the ideal scoring system for me, or the ideal tournament event system, is one where the different parts of it are split up and do not all cross over and involve each other.
Okay.
hobby is not wargaming and wargaming is not hobby. They're very, very tightly linked, but you know, you want to go and compete in one or compete in the other or compete in both, but they don't need to have their scores intermingled. I guess that's probably that's the simple version.
Yeah, even to the point of you wouldn't.
So yeah,
there's the patent thing, isn't it?
We'll take that back. So one of the things is I'll explain a little bit more detail. Okay. The patent scores should not vary in a way where everyone cannot achieve them. That's a big thing for us. So we actually massively agree with patent being scored, because it's the only way to make people actually put nice armies on the table. And you know, one of the big differentiators in Age of Sigmar and 40k is that 40k is notorious for these armies that are ridiculous, not painted, or painted to the most basic level, or full of proxies, depending on what tournament you go into. And the fact that Age of Sigmar still has lots of patent scores in it is great, because, you know, if we were only in this for competitive gaming, we would be playing chess, right? Like, we wouldn't play this game unless we like models and toys and the fluff. So we want armies to be painted at least to some degree of good. So patent scores are a great thing, but we think quite firmly that they should be used as a line. Like, you should be given a certain amount of points for painting your army. Doesn't matter the standard necessarily, you know, as long as you've done what you can, because not everyone's a great painter, but the effort is the important thing. You should be given points and then lose them if you didn't meet the standard.
Okay.
Like, we, you know, completely agree with paint score. And what we dislike is variable painting scores. Like, you got 10 points, you got 20 points. You're a really good hobbyist, you got 100 points. You don't need to win games anymore because you got your points from painting instead. That's the level that we think is wrong, because it rewards the wrong things.
Anywhere in your painting scores where it's like done better, you know, you've tried harder, your army has a wow factor,
up to 10 points available for effort. You know, loosely defined judge terms. Like, I know, you know, obviously, you know, Chuck, and you've been involved in that rules pack. Like, the Nova way of judging it using that rules pack is for us, I think, is the epitome of the wrong way to do it. is the way that is done.
Just by some wording, in a way, because in a lot of ways it's similar to Blood and Glory, where, you know, there's like scales you can achieve things at and that, but the way Blood and Glories is written is that you know how to achieve it. You know, it's very black and white. This is how I achieve this.
Yeah.
And where they want to award, and they have, I think it's at this point, I think it's 30. You can get 25 out of a possible 31.
Right.
And in there are a couple that are opinion based.
Yeah.
Okay. But so when I look at achieving my 25 points of Blood and Glory, the one that is like wow factor, although I probably think my army could get wow factor, I'd take it out.
Because you can achieve the points.
I know I can achieve the points these other ways. There's no way the judge team can debate that, really, because of how it's written. That's what I need, and it gets an army at a high standard. And Blood and Glory has some ridiculous stuff to people who, you know,
competition level painting.
Yeah, you know,
massive display bases.
Yeah, display bases. Free conversions, loads of things like that. That, you know, you think, wow, God, why do I have to do all this stuff? You don't have to do it all. You just have to do 25 points worth of it. And when you hear Ben talk about what his painting scores are, when he done it last year, once I heard him explain it and hear him say that all he wanted to do was encourage people to try new things and try and do hobby more, didn't matter how good they'd done it, they've tried something new. I know most of these people probably swap ahead and they never go back and do it again. But some guy swaps ahead and is like, my God, that guy looks awesome now. Why have I never tried to do this before? Because it's so easy. You know, that stuff I love.
One of the good examples in there of scoring done right for me is, you know, there's some points available at Blood and Glory for freehand.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't define in any way how good or bad or what the freehand has to be. Just that you went and did some freehand. And, you know, it's like saying the model is highlighted. Like, your definition of highlighted, Vince, would be very different from mine and very different from someone who just started. But as long as you've tried to highlight your model, you've got your points. And I think the important thing is that you can go into an event. You should go to an event knowing how many of those painting points you've scored already.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise that you don't achieve them.
Yeah,
you know, that's what we like. And nominations, you know, where an army's being picked to be, you know, on a painting competition, don't give them more tournament points because they win the competition or get nominated for the competition. You know,
it's a separate competition.
It's a separate competition. You're celebrating a hobby in this way. Everyone who's painted amazing armies, they're competing against each other. They get tons of recognition in the event, more than the winner. You know, the armies are displayed over lunch. Everyone looks at them. You all vote on them, or you don't vote on them, and the judge picks them. You know, they're all pictured. They're published everywhere. You know, they get a ton of recognition for it. You know, and our ideal scoring is tournament points for, you know, majors, tournament points for a minor, which is a lot less than a major, less than half ideally, but around half. Our painting scores are as we just described them. There's a minimum you can get to, and you know you're going to achieve it before you get there or not. And sports is the last one.
Should just never be involved whatsoever. That's a separate discussion though, again, I think.
Sports should, you know, you lose points if you're a bad sport, basically.
Sports is the, if there is a third rail in this conversation that we're going to touch and just blow ourselves up, it is the sports discussion, because it's probably too big to even go into, right? Of like what constitutes sports.
Yeah.
So it might be best if we shuffle that to the side. So
that's where we are. I guess the point is though, there on the sports, if we don't go into any more detail, then is that
it's separate.
I think, well, no, for me, no, because in Age, one thing that I'll say about like traditional, how Age of Sigmar has gone to this great place that it is now, is that a smaller group of people have supported it when it was absolutely terrible. You know, 4-page rules, nobody believed in it. We all quit and threw our models away.
No points.
No points. You know, some people supported it, grew the game, wrote their own points to the point where Games Workshop has basically used them. And it seems to me from the outside has encouraged this great collaboration that Games Workshop seems to have with the community now. It seems like it's come from Age of Sigmar, and the people who have supported the game through the bad times maintain this high standard of hobby we've got, and maintained a really high standard of sports. And I don't ever see them go away. So I don't know if people who think that we champion competitive play so much that we don't care about painting and we don't care about sports and we're all about winning at all costs.
We obviously do, but as we said, they're the pillars of the hobby for us as well.
Yeah.
We don't not
right, and that's why I wanted to start there, because
to be implemented differently.
But we don't want a sports competition that affects who wins the tournaments, because it's just gaming sports. It's not nominating some guy who was an epic sport for some reason. There's a whole game to it, and it shouldn't be there. If someone's a divvy, they should be punished.
No,
that's what it is for me.
So,
yeah.
All right. Okay, so yeah, and that's why I wanted to start with those initial suppositions to show that we all value the same things, right? We're all approaching this with the same value set, right? We just see different ways we'd like to have those values expressed and recognized, right? Okay, so let me pose the following loaded question. All right. Is the trap here that you're pointing at, is what you're putting your finger on, the traditional concept of best overall? Okay, before you answer that, I want to back up a moment and just talk about the painting thing. I actually agree with you for the most part on the nature of how a painting system could be constructed. I don't really particularly love paint checklists. I'm actually pretty lukewarm on them, but I understand their value. And I was going to say, if you're going to have a paint checklist, then I actually prefer it to be one, absolutely the system you talked about, where the cap is way below the maximum. You know what I'm saying? Like how you described it, of like 31, but you cap at 25. Yeah. So you give people freedom to choose what they want to do to try to express themselves. Cool. I totally am behind that. I love that concept. I'm also not a fan of specific things being rewarded. So like you mentioned, like freehand. What I like is, so when I wrote the painting pack, in the US thing. That was shocker of shockers. That was my area of interest. And how I wrote it was exactly what you described. First, like, here's the high cap. Here's what you need to do to max. It's beneath that, right? What you could theoretically achieve. And I actually broadened it bigger. And I like concrete examples of what you can do, but not individual line items. In other words, like, I separated it into like X percentage, Y percentage, Y percentage. Okay. But of total things you can get, whatever, doesn't matter, of just technique breaks. But again, you don't need to go all the way down here to hit your cap. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
And instead of saying freehand is a point and OSL is a point and this is a point, I said, do any of these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you get these points. I don't care which one you do, because any of them show me that you were trying to put in extra effort. But like, we capped long before we reached these techniques, right? And all of them are very clear. Like, here's the basic painting standard. I can read it and I can decide how deep I want to go. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
so I am absolutely in that camp. I like things that are clear for people, because the reality is, especially for newer players showing up to the game, they don't know a lot about what painting standards even are, or maybe even what these techniques are freaking called.
Yeah.
Right. And so throwing a bunch of individual terms at them that they then have to go Google to like even understand how they're supposed to paint their army, I'm not a big fan of. Right. So that's why I like these broad amorphous things, a relatively reasonable cap that they can get at. And then how I believe like the scoring should be used is for the people that go up and above. Like, we'll leave the previous question about best overall out of it and talk about best painted as its own silo. The people that go above and beyond and hit that high max over the cap contribution, right? Whatever that means. I can then pull the top 10% out and have a judge. Like, that's where I do the human judging. Cause like I've judged armies at tournaments before, obviously. Yeah. And though I look at that scoring as like who went well above and beyond, I look at the top 10% and then I go and I do a detailed judging on them to pick my like best in show, the golden is first and the Labrador is second, and like to do my Westminster dog show pick, right? But now having said that, let's return to my loaded question. Is best overall the challenge here? Because if you take best overall out of it, and we have a world where we have best general, let's call it that. I don't want to get into like loaded semantics here, obviously, but we know what we mean, right? Battle point determinative, however those exist. Best painted, and then there's a best sports. Like, again, we can shuffle the sports decision. Right now, there tends to be sports voting, so let's call it those three things, and those are the three podiums, and they don't interact. Right? Like they're independent. That is to say, the painting score leads to the best painted, and the battle points lead to the best general, and the sports leads to the best sports. If that's the world where those are the three awards at the top, maybe there's a first, second, third. I don't care. Obviously, it depends on the size of the event, all that kind of crap, right?
Yeah.
Does that solve your concerns? Because now those have been siloed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically exactly what we're arguing for.
Okay.
That the things should never be integrated into one single scoring system. They should always be separate. But I think the problem is with doing that, when you have a best general and a best painted and a best overall, we only play this game for, if you're trying to win in this game, we're not doing it for money. We're not doing it for any other reason than glory. And when you have a best overall, that takes the shine off the guy who was best general, and it takes the shine off the guy who was best painted. And best overall is rarely either of those two. Best overall is a guy who came fourth in both, for example. And rarely, for me, you play something to win it. A guy won the tournament, he should be celebrated. A guy was the best painter, he should be celebrated. Why should we celebrate someone who came fourth in both more than either of those two people? So, like, I think best overall is not something that really happens over here so much. That's more of an American thing. It happens at GT.
We only have best overall, right?
Oh, well, I suppose that's the thing. Yeah, we only have best overall. Yeah, we say we're going to combine these points. I'm going to say that guy won the event. Yeah.
what a lot of people will then say is, yeah, Brew was top before the soft scores got added in.
And that's all anyone looks at, don't they? Warhammer World, straight away, they look at the score, who won, take out all the other nonsense. Yeah. And that takes away from the guy who won best overall.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? Yeah. You know, the guy who done everything, all of a sudden people are like, we didn't really win.
Yeah.
You know, like Nova.
We did it when we reviewed the top 10 list at Nova, we pressed the button in BCP that says, give me the standings before soft score were added. And we didn't even look at the guy who won best overall.
Yeah, and Nova was unusual this year in that it didn't have a best general. And like, I don't want to beat up Chuck. You know, Chuck, this was his first year running it. I think he did a pretty good job overall. Like, yes, there were challenges or whatever, and he took most of that in. And Chuck is a guy who learns from it. He is a really good TO because he wants to learn and improve and do better, right? So I don't want to beat up a guy who put in literally hundreds of hours prepping for this tournament and running it at one of the major 3 events. But
and he's not the only guy facing those same challenges.
Right.
You know, with the same narratives coming out from lots of events because of painting scores being involved in overall general effects, you know. Yeah, that's all. So
yeah, and I think that to me, when I look at this, I think in my head, so I will, like, if you were a TO and you came to me and you said, my podiums are going to be those 3: best sports, best painted, best general. And that's it. Yeah. Like that's the awards I have. Okay. Because that's what I value all 3 of these things, and I value all 3 of them, let's say, equally, right? They're all recognition. Like, in other words, you as the viewer will bring your own value to that, right? Like, if you're a highly competitive player, you'll look at the best general and go, okay, that's the person that I think did the best to me. If you're a super hobbyist, you look at the best paint and go, wow, that person's really, they're the one who I care about, right? Or whatever. Effectively, we've placed them on, let's call it, even footing, right?
Yeah. For
whatever that's worth. The best overall is a really interesting presupposition because it does point at, and the concept of it is obviously a recognition that, and some events call this like Renaissance Man and stuff like that. There's a couple different terms for this around, but the point of it is that, like, there is a recognition that the hobby consists of all of these things, right? A great tournament is made up of a bunch of great players who are going to play well on the table, who have beautiful armies, who are all great sportsmen. Like, that's what we want. We want all of those things, right?
Agreed.
And I don't think that's a controversial idea. And the inclusion of the best overall is interesting because I don't disagree with your supposition that it does seem to be a higher award. Like, if we were going to do this, it would become a triangle, right? Like, the 3 would be points down here, and it kind of feels like this is the peak of the pyramid. So I don't disagree with that presupposition. I'm just not sure that's, I guess where I differ is I'm not sure that's a bad thing. What I mean by that is understanding completely, or at least I think, what you're saying, and being sympathetic to the position. At the same time, the value, like, I always believe in best general. The person who does the best in battle should be recognized. That was my major piece of feedback for Chuck. You need a best general. Okay, that aside. I recognize the value of the all-arounder, of the person who can bring this together. Maybe a name change does a lot. I don't know. Sometimes what's in a name can matter.
Yeah.
When you have a term like best overall, that really weights it, right? Like, that sounds like you are straight up, like, the connotation of that is you are absolutely better than everybody else. You are like Lion-O when he had to beat all the rest of the Thundercats at what they were good at. And whereas, like, if we called it, you know, I don't know, Renaissance Man or something like that, or woman, I don't want to get into a loaded term, but you get what I mean, like Renaissance player.
Yeah.
Maybe that changes the calculation, because I do think there's value in recognizing the person who has excelled in all those, even if they were maybe second, third, fourth across the board. The fact that they're able to paint to a very high standard, play to a very high standard, and, like, again, sports discussion aside, be a great sportsman, I think is something to recognize as some kind of paradigm worthy of at minimal recognition. Its placement over top of the others, I could set aside.
All right, so
that's what you just said. I think is the important thing. So I think it isn't the apex of the pyramid. It's just the center of the triangle. It's not a better award or anything else. It's just another award, and it's a thing that people could do to. Some events would use it, some events would not. But I think the best overall. But also, there is a lot in a name. And again, we play these games, we try to win them for the glory and the recognition among our peers. And when you say, the guy who won Nova officially was the guy who got best overall, although they didn't have a best general, let's say they had one. The guy who won Nova, when people say who won Nova, was that guy. But the guy who won Nova, when we talk about playing the game, actually, was the best general. And I think you confuse the terminology for people. You lose that player's achievement in that confusion of terminology. Mm-hmm. And I think I agree with you. If you were calling one best general, that's what we would be going there to play for. Would be that award. Yeah. If we called one best painting, that's what maybe you'd be going to play.
It's absolutely what I show up for. Yes.
And then if we called one Renaissance man, or best combined score, even just not saying like best in show. Sure. There are people that we know who consistently place in the top 8 of events and consistently place in the top 4 of painting. So I can think of a bunch off the top of my head.
Oh, ton.
Who would play for that award as well, whilst at the same time playing for the other 2. And you then get the best of every world in that, really, rather than saying the winner of this event is going to be the combined one. Just saying that's another thing we're going to award on also works fine.
Okay, that's an interesting example, real quick, just to support your point. So there's a couple events here run by a TO named Steve Herner. They're relatively small events, but they're wonderful events. It's called the Holy Events. So there's Holy Havoc and Holy Wars. One's a teams game, one's a single player 2,000-point game. They bring most of the competitive players in a portion of the country end up playing in these, right? Even though there is one generalship award, but he actually gives a series of 5 awards out, all of which are on sort of equal footing to a point. And his quote unquote, his sort of equivalent to best overall is called like the Holy Hammer, like the Holy Hammerist, right? Like that's the award. It doesn't have this other name, right? He's renamed the award. And I think when people then talk about it later, then they say like, I'm this, that's the award I got. They cite the specific thing, right? And so when the person says, well, who won the event? They generally point at the general, right? Because that's the person who took the points. But that person who's the hobby hammerist, the Holy Hammerist, whatever, they competed across the board and did well in everything, right? I know I'm screwing up the name of the trophy, Steve. I've never won it, so I don't know. That's why. But that sort of, it changing the name, like for those who doubt the power of a name, it does have that effect, right? At least in that case. That I understand that's completely anecdotal, but in that case, that's how people talk about it. You're not wrong.
Yeah. Okay, so for me on all this and listening to you talk about best overall and painting and all that, it's a bit of a new problem for us, this, right? Because in the UK, that's why as we said when we were talking before we went live, that I was quite interested to hear, more about the American tournament scene and that, and that's something that's opened my eyes. We don't have that problem because we have the problem differently. We only have an overall winner, right? We don't recognize best general versus best overall. We recognize the best painted army at the event and the person who won the event overall. Okay, so that's where it gets to the point where people who are competitive like us look at the standings, take away soft scores, and then take away from that person who won best overall and look at who was the best general in this case, right? And that's, I guess the problem is then, because you put all the painting scores and the general scores into one event, and then there's a ranking at the end of it, the person at the top is best overall.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what people look at. you know, and if you're going to recognize a best overall and a best general and a best painted, and it was scored in some way that didn't get combined into the overall ranking of the event, then that would go a long way to make it work best as well. I don't know what the answer to that is right now, but it's just not how it's done. People award a load of painting scores and they go on, let's say their intention was to award the best general or best overall, and that's why they've done all these painting scores. They still get loaded into the event. They still come out at the end.
In the sheet that comes out, the person who won the event is the person with the best combined scores.
At the top of the event, yeah. And that's what we face in the UK all the time. So
that's an interesting difference.
We're so strong.
That's interesting.
That's why we're so strong about having the painting scores that are for the people who are going above and beyond, not going on the final rankings.
Sure.
If I make some assumptions of why these things have started, like I could be wildly wrong here, because the one thing I will always defer to is that I haven't done wargaming tournaments forever. You know, I've played different types of tournaments, and if to encourage people to play nice and paint their armies well, you need to have such severe score and have such an impact on who wins the event. Otherwise, people don't play nice and don't paint. Then, whoa. Okay.
Was there a time in the past where the sportsmanship in Warhammer Fantasy was so bad and the painting standards were so bad that someone had to invent scores for them to make people do them?
Yeah. For me, if I'm guessing more, it's because the problem is that Warhammer takes 2.5 hours to play a game. The events are so successful now that hundreds of people turn up and we don't get a clear winner. Okay, because we haven't got enough time to play enough rounds of Swiss to get a winner we need.
Right.
So at some point, people have meddled with that in lots of different ways to try and move away and find clear winners. You know, the 20-0 scoring, the 20-0, the 18-2, and all that sort of jazz that happened, obviously. Painting scores have been put into it. Another way to, you know, differentiate people in the rankings. And I just always wonder if a lot of these things started because there was no other way to do it. Because they're around spreadsheets and people were limited about what resources they had, or the capability of most people was, you know, wasn't there to, you know, I can't bloody make Excel do anything, can I, Ian? You know, I'm frigging useless. But I'm terrible. But there's loads of other ways to do that now, and that's what we're championing more, aren't we? That
when we talk about modernizing, is that, you know, wherever these things come from, it's certainly not a modern way of scoring things. Like even down to the 30, 20, 15, 10, 5 points that we award for things, it's a little bit arbitrary and can be done better with maths.
Yeah.
And, you know.
Well, we like the big numbers because they give TOs some scope to customize their events a little bit in different ways. Then, you know, they can award, there's a bigger range, which you explain especially, there's a bigger range of numbers for people to go in and do things with painting or sports or whatever they want to do, isn't it? So, you know, if it was only like 3 for a win, 2 for a minor, 1 for a draw, then there's not much wiggle room there, is there, for them to do their own things. So
you don't want to be able to give 3 points for paint total, or something, and you wouldn't have granularity.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, I think I wouldn't want to see the world where there wasn't some kind of all-in combined score in some way. Now, again, from my personal perspective, I have no issue to it being renamed, occupying a different place in the sort of psychological landscape of how we think about these things, because I do think there is value to, like I said, to that role, right? And to TOs being able to incentivize that role. I mean, what we're really talking about here to a degree is how is the TO empowered to use the scores to incentivize the event they want to have happen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I would hope that TOs are being thoughtful about the way that they're creating these rules packs in that, and most of that I know are, that they're using, their scoring system to say, this is what I'm all about in this event, right? Like in some way, the scoring system and the podiums that are there are an expression of what the TO values, right?
Yeah.
And I think having that ability to access that, again, under any name, whatever you call it, and say, I value somebody who comes to play in all categories, who wants to be the Jack of all trades award. I don't care. Again, we can call this thing anything, right? I think says a lot about, as a TO, the kind of event you're trying to encourage. I think there's probably a soft incentive then for people to try to compete in everything as well. Like, people are more aware of it, so they can't silo as hard, right? It becomes harder for somebody to go like, well, I don't need to care about painting or sports at all. I can just silo myself into fighting so I can show up with great plastic or something. Now, I understand that's a completely straw man argument, because the TO can just write into the rules pack, everything has to be to a 3-color standard, period, or shut up or you don't play.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So like, I don't want to straw man too hard here. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I think that's, it's interesting. My ultimate drive with it, and it's funny because I wasn't aware of that in the UK event scene, that there wasn't, that concept of sort of best general didn't get expressed as much. So that's interesting, because I can understand the frustration, because I believe that is value that should absolutely be recognized the same as, best painted or something, right? We know, we're not under the delusion here that the person who wins best general has actually proven themselves to be the absolute best tactician, player, and be piloting the best army at that particular event, right? Like, that is to say, we don't play enough rounds. There's too many intangibles. That's not actually what's happened.
No, because most likely there's 3 people that have won those 5 games, 3 people that have become the best general, and then somewhere along the line, someone's decided that to tie break that, the most sporting person is going to be the one who wins. The person who done a little bit better painting, he's the one who's the best general, and that's what we're against, right?
Yeah,
really. I suppose that's what we're trying to change, and open people's eyes up that there's other ways to do it.
Sure, which is completely fair. And understandable, because yeah, we don't play enough games nor have enough time. That's not what we're on about here, right? Like, we're not going to go to the sort of Magic system where you play like 82 rounds, and then you have a top, then you have a cut to top 8, and then you play another 72 rounds, and then you celebrate your 53rd birthday, and you die at the table just after you are crowned king of the Pro Ultimate Tour.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what it would take if we did this in Warhammer, to the same level. The games just it's not the same amount of time. We don't have the same. I would also say we tend to, the playing audience tends to skew older in Warhammer, especially Age of Sigmar. And like, a lot of us have kids and families, and the fact that you can get away for a weekend at all for a tournament is often a great luxury, right? So
it's hard to convince people to even play 6 rounds over 5, isn't it? That's,
right.
6 rounds will go a long way to, help. It doesn't do enough to solve the problem, so people don't do it though, do they? We need to play 7 or 8 rounds, and then we get a true winner.
Yeah, and it's just,
and even then I wouldn't be happy because I'd want a top 8.
Sure, yeah, and that's my point. Like, we're just, that's a road that's never going to happen. But yes, exactly. No, you're right. So we have to.
Finish though. Some of your some of the ones in the States, the really big ones, are doing that, right?
40k events.
40k events are going all out. What was the
LVO? I think did the top 8 40k, right?
Did they? Yeah, they played like 3. They played over 3 days. They had a cup.
Oh yeah, they did do that this year. Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I hope to God that never happens in Age of Sigmar. That would be the quickest way to get me not to sign up for a tournament. That's for darn sure.
I think a lot of them are doing like what X-Wing call like flights, aren't they? Where you'll put 100 people on one day, 100 people on another day, and then they'll invite the top 30 from each to come back on the Sunday and play, a few more rounds. So, and allowing people then who don't want to play for 3 days to, have 2 days around that where they can do what they want and enjoy the part of the con or the city they're visiting. So some of the bigger cons are, they're considering this stuff.
Well, and I can understand it, I guess, for 40k, because like those 40k events, I think the TO for a lot of LVO is in the chat right now. So you'll have to tell me, like, I think he said, yeah, they're doing the top 8 cut. Wow, more power to you, brother. Like, you are that. Scott is an absolute beast. You're beast mode, my friend. He is made of steel running that event. But at the same time, 40k events tend to have 40k at Adepticon. I mean, 40, like Age of Sigmar at Adepticon was huge. It had almost 200 people registered, etc. It was a giant tournament.
Yeah.
But it was, then you look across the hall and you see the 40k tournament, and it's got like 500 plus players, 600 players, right?
Yeah, huge.
It's a different magnitude of like trying to get to what it is.
Yeah, we're considering heading over, aren't we, for Age of Sigmar? You know, like I mean,
yeah, so we're going to LVO next year.
Well, you'll have a great time at LVO. The Scott who runs the AOS tournament at LVO is one of the greatest TOs. He's and one of the greatest dudes. He's a really, really great guy. Puts together a great show. So if you're going over there, you will have an excellent time. You should also come. I won't see you there because LVO is sadly the one I can't make it to. It's too far across the country at a bad time of year for me. But you should also come over for Adepticon or something some year. It'd be great to see you.
Yeah,
that's on our list of things to try and organize as well.
Yeah. It's hard with families and that, isn't it? You know, to come away for so long, but you know,
we made it for Vegas because it's Vegas.
Sure, yeah, it's I get it. If you've never been there, it is a thing you should experience at least once. Yes. Never has there been a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. So let's get down into some individual round scoring. Because this time all advance. I've really put a lot of pressure on you guys to like advance your ideas, and then I make you defend them. That's not fair as a discussion. So I'll be the one this time, and you can blow holes in what you don't like about what I advance.
Okay.
We'll have some fun that way. So I love secondaries. This is where we can start talking about these. I love secondaries. I think they're wonderful. And my personal particular favorite for systems of scoring breaks down quite simple. I think something like NashCon honestly captures about my perfect breakdown. And by the way, like I wrote a scheme pack, like a secondaries pack that NashCon's used and Nova, and I think the City GT used them, and a lot of people have used, like Tom and I put that together. I've been a proponent of these. I have a video from 2017 talking about why I think we need them. I've done a lot about this. It's a big thing for me. I'm on about this. So in my sort of ideal system, in my ideal world, you look at the event, you look at the round, I should say, sorry. And you have a shared goal that is the scenario as dictated by usually the 18 core scenarios. I feel like we've expanded those to be big enough that they more or less have a lot of different play experiences contained within them. And as I said earlier, are pretty good. And those tend to create major win, minor win, and then reflectively minor loss or major loss, right? And those are worth, let's say, 15 points. I'm picking a number.
Yeah.
The major is worth 15 is what I mean. So maybe a minor win is worth, I don't know, 10. Maybe a minor loss is worth 7. Maybe a major loss is worth 0. Okay. I've thrown out some numbers. I don't want to quibble about the exact math. We can play with those. Yeah. I'm not willing to die on the hill of my exact numbers. And then you have a secondary objective, which is asymmetrical. That is to say, both players do not share the same secondary. I don't like that. Okay. I like a suite of secondary choices. So think like let's just use the hidden agenda since it's a common language that got put out, right? If I were going to be the person employing the hidden agendas in a 5-round tournament, what I would do is I would put them onto cards. Like I would put them onto like magic cards, right? Like I would literally put them on individual cards, and then they would be random. And at the start of the game, you would pick 7 of them. Okay. And at the start of each game, you would get to decide which one of the 7, you have 7, you're only going to play 5 rounds. So 2 you can just throw away and you don't use at all, right? And you get to pick which one of the 7 you're going to attempt to accomplish in that game. All right? If you do that, it's worth, let's say, 7 points, the equivalent of on what I just said, minor loss, right?
Okay.
And they are generally, the best way they should be written is to be non-mutually exclusive, i.e. we can both achieve them. One of us can achieve them, or none of us can achieve them. All of those are potential outcomes of secondaries, because the major victory is a bifurcated scenario. It only has one setting, right? Like if somebody wins major, then you by necessity have a major loss. Those are a light switch. Yeah. Okay. These aren't. And as a result, sort of the maximum for a round becomes 22. But if you like minor loss and manage to pull your secondary, you end up at like, let's say 14, just shy of the major win alone. So you get all sorts of interesting differentiation in the score that I think still very much reflects generalship, because you have to respond to the nature of the scenario, the table, and be able to achieve this secondary thing. Now, there's the argument of like, to pre-tackle this one, there's the argument of like, well, if I'm playing a weaker player, I'm still more likely to achieve my secondary and my primary. Okay. And my answer is, well, maybe. That depends on how well you know your army, the scenario, and what you've picked, because some of these secondaries may be somewhat complicated to achieve. So I would argue that, as always, they rest and should rest in the way that they're designed, mainly in your generalship, your ability to tactically respond. My favorite ones are the ones that are written to have some kind of tension with the major objectives that often happen. So like things that pull you to the outer edges of the table, I like as hidden agendas or schemes or secondary objectives, because most objectives in the game pull you toward the center. Right. So that creates an interesting tension of how you have to navigate those waters. And I'm willing to let the weaker player thing go, because the reality is, in most tournaments, you don't end up having vast deltas in skill comparisons deep into the tournament. Like, if you have the proper differentiation of scoring, which these provide by providing more nuanced deltas in scoring, okay, like that is to say, the potential scores here are like 22, 15, 14, 17, you know, whatever. There's a bunch of lists, right? Then you can make more accurate matchups faster earlier in the tournament and prevent vast deltas in theoretical skill. Hence, none of these become cakewalks, probably past round 3, maybe beginning in round 2, depending on how tightly you write these things. So the achievement of them remains a proof of tactical acumen regardless. And they also provide an interesting incentive where players who may be in a bad matchup, right? Like bad matchups happen. You could have two players of incredibly great skill and just like both, but your army meets your scissors and you meet your rock, and the scenario piles on top, right? There was a tournament where I played Tom and I was playing Iron Jaws against his KO, but the scenario we were in and the table we were on heavily favored me. I had cover, I had rules, like the scenario backed up my Iron Jaws needed to get to a center point and hold it, and just like, and he, like, that was it. So he had no choice. He couldn't just shoot me off, and I smashed him off the table. Right? It was a terrible matchup for him.
Yeah.
Even though like he was running like a clown car Alpha Strike list, which would normally be quite good against my army. So these help couch that, because by having the secondary to fall back to, I can look at the matchup and go, God, it is going to be damn near impossible for me to get the major here. I'm going to try, but I just know, like, odds are I'm 90-10 in this match. Like, those things can exist sometimes, right? They're rare now, but they can exist.
Okay. Yeah.
I can still play for the secondary and pull something out of this. I can walk with my 7 points and feel like I still achieved a tactical objective. And because it's not mutually exclusive with the opponent, right? Because they still are going to be doing their own thing. I don't know what the hell it is, because it's hidden. Maybe they get theirs, maybe they don't, but I don't walk away empty-handed because I feel like I got the sour side of a bad matchup. So that's the way I would trot all this out at a very detailed level. I know I just went like, boy, did we just go inside baseball. But that's sort of my world of why I like secondaries and why I think they have value. So now I'll turn to you for your thoughts.
Okay, so a question. Why are you putting secondaries into your event in the first place?
That was exactly what I was going to say. It's good.
Sure. For all of the reasons I just said, I think they help more accurately match player skill faster if they're trotted out in the way I just said. I think they make for more interesting challenges on the table to the general, so that the game itself becomes a greater test of actual tabletop tactical skill, as opposed to executing a set plan. Like, I will show up, I will do A, I will do B. I think that they cause more interesting interactions with the individual table terrain / scenario / army you're facing / realm rules / whatever, and how you achieve them. I don't disagree that there is already a wide amount of variance, but in general, multi-objective things test your skill more. When you're trying to hit a single dot, it is easier than when you need to hit 2 dots. Playing ping pong with a single ball is undoubtedly easier than playing with 2 balls. Okay. And you have to express and creatively think in different ways. And if we're really on about trying to find a general off of battle points that is head and shoulders above the rest, this is a darn good way to do it.
Okay, so that boils down to it, and the very last thing you said there is that have these not come from the need to tie break people on the same battle points? That is what I hope to hear. I thought I'd hear you say maybe, some of the points are fair. You're matching people up quicker. I think that's actually quite reasonable, to be honest. But
if you match people up incorrectly,
no, but
that's a separate question.
You're talking about Swiss or true Swiss?
Yeah.
Okay, but what we're saying there is,
hang on. Do the first part of the question first, and we'll mention that bit in a second. It's like a 2-part answer. So my question, similar to your question, would be, why do you think you need to rewrite the way the game works? Do you not think it's good enough already?
No.
That's a leading question, obviously, but
I'll give you the straight answer. No.
You think you're not into the missions? You need to add more to these missions that are already in play?
Yeah, that's fair.
100%.
I guess so. Probably the first part of the answer is, and you probably agree with me on this, we don't think the game needs more stuff added to it.
Yeah,
it has got all those things that you said. It's got realms, it's got matchups, it's got the person who's in front of you on the other side of the table, it's got dice.
Yeah,
it's got all these things already, and you could play largely the same opponent 20 or 30 or 40 times in a row with the same army and have a different game just because of the battle plan realm combination. Before there's so much goes on in a game of Age of Sigmar, and people don't play it enough. Even people who practice purposefully like we do don't play enough to fully understand the game. I just don't think, I feel that it needs more. It needs us to write more rules for it, I guess, is the first thing.
Or Jervis Johnson to add more rules to the game, even for that reason.
Yeah. So let me lever that apart real quick, and let me give some more color as to why I think that's the case. What you've described are variables, not objectives, not goals, right? And my ultimate argument is that there is a fault line here that I'm putting my finger on. Variables are great, okay? Variables are valuable. Your realms, your scenario, your opponent, your army that you're facing, all of that are variables in the experience. And I don't disagree with any point you just made. But your goal that you are trying to achieve, right, to win, if winning is to be sort of the end goal, I'm trying to win the round, right, whatever that means, aiming at a single thing, a single point, is simply easier and less instructive of quality in your generalship than aiming at 2 points. Okay? And the ability to achieve multiple objectives just by going to 2. I'm not this has I think of the productivity curve. Okay, the productivity curve says to people who are the most productive work on generally 2 projects at a time. But you go to 3, it falls off like a rock. I think that's the case with this too. I'm not a fan of go to tertiaries and quadraries and just have 72,000 things to achieve. This will fall off fast, right? Because you will just overwhelm people. But I think there is immense value to 2 objectives that are different than simply the play experience variables. That's why I'm putting my finger on that.
So I guess I disagree with that, because I know objective in a game of Age of Sigmar may be the goal, or maybe the point you are trying to ultimately hit, but the journey to that goal is a very large series of it's one very large, very divergent decision tree, and there are enough sub goals that you have to hit along the way to that final goal, such as, where do I deploy? Which units do I defend with? Where do I take first turn? Do I take second turn? do I attack here? Do I defend here? Do I move? There's so much going on in a game already. The objectives are, you know, I actually personally think that the battle plans in Age of Sigmar are overcomplicated. Like, I think you can, you know, the old school Warhammer 40k scenarios, you know, control the point in the center, control a point in each other's deployment zone, control table quarters. I think super simple objectives are enough to get great games when you combine all these other factors in personally.
Along with progressive scoring them and that, though, yeah.
Yeah, scoring them properly. But, you know, I think, I don't think in any way that adding an objective adds more skill to the game. I just think it adds complexity without adding anything necessarily to the game.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we have. I've got to bring in my secondary here to help me argue. I would say that from my personal experience, is where I'm operating, and I will say that I find the games that have those secondaries much more engaging than games where I'm only aiming at the single point, because I have more things to think about, more things to aim at. Now, again, personal experience may vary. A lot of what we're arguing, people are going to read this differently, right? But I will also say that that isn't the only, the real trick here is that's not the only thing I'm resting my argument on, right? Like, I could lose this point and my argument would still be salient, because I still think, it does a better job of then creating score differentials that more faster pair equal skilled players, which is what you ultimately want. When all you have is two settings, because one of the big challenges, a lot of these scenarios are very much bifurcated into major and minor, major win and major loss. Like, that is to say, it's almost impossible to achieve a minor in a lot of these scenarios. Yeah. If there's any value to the original 2016 scenarios, by the way, it's that many of them are more likely to produce minor wins, which I think has extreme value. Minor wins are the best thing you can have happen in your tournament. I am a big fan of, like, knife to the heart being your first scenario you play, because it's a scenario that almost dictates people achieving minors. Okay. Yeah. And if you get a major in it, well, you either had an opponent that you rickrolled, right? Or you're a pretty strong player. But either way, it very quickly bifurcates people out in a score. Anyway, or I shouldn't say bifurcates. It very quickly segments people. That's the right word.
Yeah.
So that is also value. Here's another piece of point of value. It's fun. Those hidden secondaries are fun, and give people who are losing or whatever, who maybe aren't great at achieving the full-fledged victory, something to play for and feel like they walked away still getting a win, and like a win for their own personal sense. Okay. There was a tournament I was in that used secondaries where I went 1-4. That's a real winner right there. Okay. But I've completed my secondary in all 5 games. I felt great because I felt like I had accomplished something every round. Now, I was in no danger of disrupting the ultimate scoring of the tournament, right? Like, because of the way the points broke out, I wasn't even in striking distance of the first at the top. Yeah. They had won their 5 games. They had majored out and achieved their secondaries in 4 out of the 5. And they were like a clear winner. I wasn't threatening them, but I got a lot more out of it. Right. And I think that a huge concern here is not just worrying about the 3 people who end up at the top, but worrying about, like, that's great. I want to be able to decide who's the best. But 90x high percentage of the people who are participating in that tournament aren't those people.
Yeah.
And giving them something positive to play for every round that feels like a victory to them, that doesn't ultimately threaten the people at the top, that seems quite beneficial.
Okay. Right. I'm gonna put the meat of it down for us about secondaries, because I feel that a lot of things you're saying are great, right? But let's start with the secondary missions. Seem to me as if they've come into place as another way to break up the standings, right? To decide who's win the tournament, because we can't play enough rounds of Swiss and all the things you said before. So secondaries don't do that, guaranteed, right? Because the 3 people on 5-0 could all have achieved all their secondaries as well. So they haven't achieved that goal, right?
Yep.
And that is why we are against secondaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
One
of the reasons we're against secondaries, right?
Which, by the way, just to be very clear, I don't think that's a value of secondaries. I think it's a value of splitting up the field mid-game throughout the tournament. I do not find them valuable to be determinative of the overall winner. So
So you're liking them for a lot of good reasons. Okay. So touch on one other thing, right? If the hidden agendas rules were not written on Monday or whenever it was, and were not announced,
sure,
and we didn't have them probably coming into play in some way for us.
Sure.
Games Workshop had not published them. Jervis Johnson hadn't wrote the article for a lot of the same reasons that you like, you know, who come into the mission with different agendas and different things that we want out of the games. You know, a bit of a narrative thing. I would lean towards, and some of that from what he wrote. I would be saying that I am not interested in you changing Age of Sigmar and adding other layers to the missions. I'd be saying, you're comping the game now, mate. I'm not interested. I just want to play the missions that are in it. Now, Games Workshop can change the game because it's their game, right?
Sure.
So now they are official, right? So a lot of the reasons you're saying are brilliant. I love what you're saying about that. It's not just about those top 3 people at the end. You know, it's not. No, you know, none of us would be enjoying these events without the other 97 people who have come along. The people who are at the bottom, you know, like yourself in that one event where you've gone 1-4 and you've enjoyed yourself chasing these other missions or whatever else is going on in the day. You know, the person who's after the wooden spoon. We need to recognize all these people that have come and made it great for everybody. You know, they're doing their social, they're doing the hobby. They are just trying their hardest, and maybe it hasn't worked out for them that day. You know,
sure.
That's all fantastic. And I guess I've got no problems with secondaries for all those reasons. Now they're an official part. Now they're going to be an official part of the game. You know, the part about them that I am off, and you say you're off as well, is it settling who decides the tournaments, which is why I believe they've come about. So you talked about settling it quicker and finding, you know, matching up.
Yeah, it helps. Like let's call it the ionization attraction, right, or whatever. Like it helps segment the field into sort of like against like. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. And okay, fine. That does work, because I think what Ian was going to say earlier is that we're also a big proponent of using true Swiss, as we call it, where historically in wargaming events, players have been paired first ranked versus second ranked, third ranked versus fourth ranked, fifth ranked versus sixth ranked, and so on and so on.
Based on their kill points or whatever.
Yeah, based on whatever their tiebreaker is. So a lot of people have got major wins round 1. The 2 people at the top who have got the most kill points, let's say only 2 got 2,000 points, they will play each other. And again, I guess that is because everyone had Excel spreadsheets. It couldn't do true Swiss in the spreadsheet. The only way they had to sort was, you know, sort by column B and whatever. And that's not how true Swiss is, right? You know, so what it would really be is that every single person on 30 tournament points would play another random person on 30 tournament points. Now, what Vince said does do that, right? If you use true Swiss, that, you know, you'd have some guy who was on 15 and some guy on 22. The random 22s would play each other. Yes. So it would still do that type of thing, but maybe not how. But that's season away.
But that's based on the assumption that those extra points from the game. Those extra points in the game are a differentiator of skill within that game, which is my big problem with it is, and I guess the mathematical problem with it from a competitor point of view is the outcome of a game should always be binary. It should always be a win or a loss. The degree of your win or loss, kill points was to some extent a degree of your win or loss.
Sure.
The degree of your win or loss should never affect where you come in the tournament. And a secondary mission that alters your score for the round is a degree of win or loss.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd ask why. Like, I need to unpack that assumption, because I'm not sure I as it stands right now, I definitely don't agree with that. I don't know why we wouldn't want to understand the degree of win or loss. Like some people will win more. And admittedly, yes, like just to get this out of the way, that could be because they played a weaker person. Ideally, post round 1, 2, that stops happening in my world.
But
right? Because people have started to separate out.
Round 1 and 2 decide the tournament. That's why, you know, a lot of people have said exactly what you've said, have said, yeah, but you know, it could be because you played a weaker opponent, but it also could be this. More often than not, it's because you played a weaker opponent. So what happens in, you know, I didn't play fantasy, I was playing other war games, but what traditionally happened in a lot of tournaments I played where you scored a number of points from 0 to 8, is if round 1 I got paired with a weak player, I would beat him 8-0. And then all I would need to do was win my next 2 games 6-2 and I'd win the tournament. Whereas someone else, when the 2 other good players in the tournament got paired against each other, and in round 1 they maybe went 5-4, their tournament was over. Because they could I'd say, point.
Like example you've done.
Let me finish. So although with more round, you know, with 5 rounds that evens out a little bit more, let's say that, you know, let's say that I smash someone into the ground and score a lot of points in game 1 of something. That can, I mean, every game is just as valuable. Is the problem. Your game 1 is no less valuable than your game 5. So it doesn't matter that you find your match further up. It still means that you've had some easier games earlier on and being rewarded for them in the final standing. And the fact that you've had easier games should not reward you in where you stand in the tournament. That's why games should be atomic. And if you look at other games that are much bigger than our niche little hobby, no game in the world, to my knowledge, big game, big sport, rewards you for the degree of your victory.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm not sure that that's the case.
Well, no game that I can name rewards you for the degree.
So here's one: American college football, one of the largest, most highly competitive things in the world that draws an insane amount of money. Absolutely has its rankings based on not just whether you won or lost, but how you won or lost, because the rankings are decided by sort of committee, to keep it simple. And if you were supposed to beat this team by 30 points and you only beat them by 2, you still got the win. But when those rankings come out, you might drop a couple ranks.
That's ELO. That's a completely different system, though.
Yeah, is that not to support, like, because some colleges' budgets are so big and their football programs are massive compared, and they have to play like a college that's smaller or something?
It has to do with a lot of like there wasn't a hard championship and stuff. A lot of different.
So that's different. That's league scoring versus tournament scoring. So chess does the same. So chess uses ELO, which is the biggest recognized points-based system in the world, oldest one. If I'm a chess grandmaster and I play Ritchie and I beat him, I get nothing. If Ritchie beats me, I lose a whole load of points. So that's a different thing to an atomic-based tournament where you're just playing for wins and losses in the day.
And that's fair, but and ultimately my argument would be, so let's return back to this. Like, again, the argument of I'm still not sold on the wins or losses, because the difference is this, like, yes, I might have an easy game round 1, but if I bifurcate or if I segment people faster into like on like matches, an easy game round 1 means nothing for the rest of the tournament, unless I was already such a good player. Because what's going to happen is I'm going to very quickly, like, yeah, sure, if 2 random great players happen to meet each other round 1, okay, one of them is still going to come out on top and one of them is still going to not. And under the system I described, like, because the major and minor still ultimately are the huge weight and still break to 15-0 or whatever. And as the rounds progress, those strong people are going to find each other real fast. And the fact that one of them had an easy game round 1, that doesn't mean anything if I run up against the other stronger player who, because of the more finely tuned scoring, has now found me. I might have skipped that guy. When it was just randomly assigned from a bigger pool, I might have never met that equally strong player. I could have kept lucky matching, right? But here, I can't ride that. Like in a world where we have such a varying skill level over the tournament, unless we're going to pre-screen people, we have to accept that there's going to be some people who have the potential of lucky matchups early. My goal is to stop that as quickly as possible and to get like against like. And so, yeah, I might have like catapulted or trampolined. You know, I guess that's the term for it when you trampoline, right? Round one, you're punching nerds. But I'm going to find the hardcore person who's going to fight me like round 3 and 4 and 5. And like, if I persist in remaining at that top, I'm only fighting people who have also persisted against tough competition, because our tuning score here, the segment that we've made is so tight that it can only be the tightest of players. You can't lucky match up 2 or 3 rounds in a row. So what's happened is, yeah, sure, great. You trampoline round 1. You're going to get smashed off the table round 3 because you're in a place you don't belong. Then you're out of there. Like, I don't, smash is probably the wrong word. Maybe you're good enough. Maybe you're at, I don't know, we can put whatever imaginary rubric we want to say here, right? That better person's going to win out. And then so on and so forth. Now, again, I don't see this as the decider, because you're totally right. Like, it could still come to 5 games and it could still be ties. I don't disagree about that. My personal feeling for that is for the sort of tiebreaker of choice, which we haven't talked about. But my personal, I like strength of schedule myself as a sort of decider at the top. I always liked strength of schedule in Magic. I thought it was a great tiebreaker for in the Magic world. So that would be my pushback against that. You're encouraging more bad like more unequal matchups if you set it to 1-0s.
I think you got a fair point. Like, it's not something that we talked about a lot ourselves personally.
So using that system supposes that you don't. I mean, that's a completely different tournament system.
Yeah.
Right. You've got multiple level scoring in there, and then you're matching people within a different bracket. My argument. So what you just said is good, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with it. It's different, but I wouldn't necessarily disagree with it. The bit I would then disagree on is that secondary objectives give a true accounting of slightly better skill or not. Like, I don't feel that secondary objectives are enough to make that differentiation, enough to say, here's your extra 7 points. Like, for your 15 points for your major, you play a game of Age of Sigmar.
Sure.
For your 7 points for your secondary objective, you play a mini game that you may or may not accomplish along the way.
Yeah.
That is even more reliant on the matchup, on the other things going on top of what's already gone on. Like, if you get put into a certain matchup that's hard, in order to win the game, you may not be able to accomplish your secondary because of circumstances.
Sure.
So we come back to the same thing of scoring levels, because I have a difficult game where I can't accomplish my secondary, but I still managed to win the game, which is, I've still won a major. Why should I now be ranked lower than a guy who accomplished the secondary?
Well, because theoretically he did. Like, again, that's why I like the pool of choices, because I'm trying to out minimize, like, in a pool of choices where I'm choosing for the thing, I'm theoretically minimizing. I'm not going to say zeroing out, because that's
of course
far too big of a swing, but I'm minimizing the impact of that. Right. So, like, in a game where let's take a hidden agenda item I don't like. I would never write one this tightly construed, but let's just give this example, okay? Because it'll be easy to trot out. Kill the enemy general. Okay, I don't like that. I think that's a bad hidden agenda item.
Yeah.
I can give you examples of things I like in a moment, but we'll get there. The kill the enemy general. Okay. In the game where I'm up against, and like, if I just had it, if it was a printed on the scenario secondary, which is how a lot of tournaments do it, right? And I run up against Nagash, and I don't have the firepower in the clip to kill Nagash. Cool. That's an auto lose. That had nothing to do with my skill, right? Like, because I could still beat Nagash. Like, you can beat a Nagash army without killing Nagash, right? That just means I lost those points for no reason. But in a world where I have more choices than I have rounds, and I get to choose the hidden agenda item that I'm using that round, I would never draw. I'm never picking the kill the enemy general card against Nagash, right? I'm gonna pick the have 3 of your spells unbound hidden agenda, right? And I'm gonna smoke that the secondary objective. Right? Like I'm coast into this one, you know, like so again, like I'm being, you know, obsequious in my examples, but for comedy purposes.
I'm coming to that tournament.
Yeah.
I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm all over that one, baby.
Yeah. So like that's I do think it minimizes those effects. And if that, like, I don't disagree with you, it's a mini game. Like it is. It's a mini game within a game. You're not wrong about that. But my ability to still achieve it while simultaneously achieving my primary thing, I have an opportunity cost to my resources, right? I'm a big fan of hidden agendas that require the sacrifice of your pieces. That is to say, like, what your general or your hero needs to die, or your wizard needs to die, or this unit needs to be annihilated, or these X units need to be annihilated, or whatever. I'm a big fan of things that require you hidden agenda items that require you to lose to win, because then there becomes, that's why I said I like it when there's interesting tension between the primary and secondary, because then I think that's absolutely generalship. If I can lose pieces and still achieve the ultimate goal, if I can act in ways that may be counter with exactly the right number of resources to achieve the secondary while still achieving the win, right? That is generalship. You have used your pieces in their most optimal way. That is the heart of this matter, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Like, so I guess if I was to summarize that, I would say that they are clearly not awful ideas, and they're clearly.
I'll take it.
And so I'm going to expand on that a little bit more in a second. They're clearly not awful ideas, and they're well thought out, and the maths is there to support them. Opinion-wise, I don't like it. You know, you do like it, and there's just opinion in there, as with many, as there will be with many things. The things it comes back to for me is, you know, it, like, if you were designing a game and tell me that this is how it was going to work, I would be like, I like the sound of this game, but that's not the way Sigmar works right now. And so I would err away from this based on the fact that it's not how Sigmar works. One of the things I said when they released their match play agendas,
the hidden
was that there's nothing like inherently wrong with agendas. Like if you implemented agendas and said, we're going to use these to decide the winner in the event of an objective tie rather than kill points, it'd be great. It's all about the implementation, right? And what you're talking about for me is a proper implementation of secondary objectives with reasons. What I feel, so coming back to when I said not awful, what I feel happens at a lot of tournaments is the implementations they use for the secondaries or for the other things are often just not very good. They're not tested. Someone's just written them down out of their head. They've asked their 3 friends. They thought it was okay. And, you know, that's a lot of the, when we come back to the standardization thing, again, not always because everything everyone does is bad. Going back to your example of re-rolling the realm feature after round 4, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't massively change the game. But because of the tendency of the things people implement to be so all over the place, you know, it's difficult to say whether things are going to be good or not. And so the default position from a place where you're trying to get to some kind of standardization or consistent experiences is just to say, let's not do it. Because the alternative is to say, let's all do our own stuff and come up with some grand council where we all test everything, which is completely impossible, I guess. So although, you know, there are a myriad ideas out there that are fantastic, but this is why we talk about sticking to the rules as written, because everyone will just diverge, whether it be with bad ideas or good ones.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, I want to cover on a few things real quick that people asked in the comments just to answer these. So LLV asked, would the system be a one use only for each card during the event? Yes, it would. Like in the system I'm describing, you can only use each of these cards once per event, so you got to burn them. And by the way, if you don't like you can impact the achievement percentage by increasing the pool size, right? Like a pool of 9 or 12 is going to have a higher percentage of completion rate than a pool of 5 or 7, right? So that's what
implementation again. Implementation is important.
The devil is absolutely in the details of this. Like that is on one point we are in complete agreement. Yeah, like you can do the basic framework of the concept. It's not like there's some innate. That's why these discussions are so tricky and complicated. And I love the nuance and thought you guys have with this and recognition of it. I knew this was going to be good because I just from listening to you guys, I knew you guys were deep thinkers about this stuff. There's nothing innately good about this concept of like secondaries or hidden agendas, right? It's not like you just look at it and go, yep, that's a win. Just do it. However, it's always going to be positive. Cool, man. No, I don't think that for a moment, right? Like the devil's in the details of this 100%. By the way, I'm going to make a prediction that this episode will have lots of thumbs downs because somebody will disagree with one of the two things we said. And be like, I'll get a high rate of that because we've like charted a lot of sides of both issues. Somebody's going to be massively against one of the two of us and be like, I'm angry, thumbs down. But hey, I don't care. It's a good discussion. It's worth it. And also that, yes, like somebody made a reference in the comments to Malifaux. And yeah, Malifaux has a sort of similar concept. It plays out differently, obviously, in a skirmish size game and the nature of their schemes and what you achieve versus your strategy and stuff. But yes, I think Malifaux is a very well-designed game in that regard. But it's not like you couldn't just port those concepts directly over. That's another example of like good ideas don't translate like that immediately, right? Yeah. It was real cool to name a car Nova until you took it into like a Spanish speaking country where Nova translates to no go or whatever, right? So things don't port. All right, cool.
So the important thing that you're bringing up here is it's a very different chat about secondaries. It's a very different chat to what is being had, isn't it?
It's different to what Games Workshop are doing with it.
Well, what I mean is that people are talking about secondaries. The way I approach with that first question, are you trying to solve it to settle who wins the tournament? I think that's what people are focused on. The bit that you're raising where you're hoping to separate people off earlier and find people with the same sort of skill level quicker through your scoring. That's quite new to the discussion. I think.
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, from what people have been bringing up. So that's certainly interesting for me to this time trying to think to tournaments that I've played in or watched who have had anything like this, and if they've just like loaded them at the end, where they've had their event and it's been like 2020, 2020, 2020, 40, 40 on, and they've not loaded these secondaries, in the pairings to do what you're trying to achieve, because it does help separate people a little bit quicker, and it will help us. It will help to maybe even find an overall winner by the end when you're pairing them like that a little bit more. And I must say I am more open to secondaries now that Games Workshop have wrote the rules for them.
Sure.
So
what I'll say is in my limited experience, and I have the statistics of what we did, because when we've done this 2 years at NashCon, David Griffin in his tournament, which is about 40 people both years. It's not huge, but so I don't have a huge pile of statistics. I don't have an LLV pile of statistics, but what I will say is that like I have the Excel sheets that show the completion rates and round by round, and what you saw was that the field did segment quicker.
It will, yeah.
And then, like at the end, the scores were more spread. People achieve different things. Now, again, I don't think, like, to really hone in, I am totally sympathetic and agree with you that, like, if your goal is figure out the true winner from the tied people at the end, this doesn't get you there. That's not the point. It's not what we need to do. right? That's not solving that problem.
I think that's what most people are focused on. Maybe even me, really. That's certainly what I was focused on from it. So, and anybody I've had a discussion with about it, even people who have, you know, helped implement this rule, I guess.
Everyone is focused on.
Everyone's focused on that. They're not giving. They're not talking what you're saying there. You know, and that obviously comes down from experience on the US scene, where you guys have used it for a lot longer than we have in the UK. And you know, that's something that's more apparent to you guys, because for us right now, and I'd say even for some probably important people who've done it, if they were saying some of the things that you said to me, you know, I'd be maybe even a bit more convinced. So yeah.
All right, so let's cover the last mile here, which is that decider at the end. Right. So we've got some ties. I don't care. However we've gotten there. Let's leave all the rest of this behind and assume that however we've played, we.
Can you still hear us, Vince?
Yeah, I can. Sorry. My little dog is down here and decided to make the microphone.
We were looking at all our feet. What have we touched?
No, it was me. My dog decided to. This has like my headphones have a little thing on them that muted my dog came up and muted it. Sorry. So let's assume we've gotten to a tie at the end. We won't worry about how we got there. Leave all that to the side. Yeah. We got to a tie. What's your ideal world for the separation of finding the sort of the ultimate winner? Because I don't think you're a fan of kill points, and neither am I.
No.
I'm a big non-proponent of those. I'd like to see those get dead and buried. Like with that to me is like, let's leave that behind. Like that's like an Ottoman Empire idea. That's gone.
And we're glad that because of the changes that have been made to the game and how you write army lists, in that endless spells and command points, you can't get those points. Everybody knows that now.
They've made kill points disappear.
They've made kill points go. You know, there's no one who thinks that they're a good idea anymore. I think again, you know, go back to a tournament, a TO, trying to do something fun with this event. They're a massive legacy thing. People love talking about them. I got 10,000, you know, I got 9,000. Let people have that, you know, recognize the person who's done the most killing with a little award, you know.
Side achievements.
You can do
sure. As a completely siloed achievement, I would agree with you. I have no fun. It's a fun thing to just measure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I think anything is great as a siloed achievement. Yeah. Like anything you want to come up with could be great. Right.
Yeah. So
strength of schedule is the answer. Basically, I find it difficult to believe anything could ever be as good.
I find myself in total agreement with you here. There you go. This is we've come back around. We've met on the other side of the circle here. Yeah, like strength of schedule to me is just the obvious answer, right? Because it does again measure that. Like if what we're trying to do here is evaluate how you performed as a general, more difficult situations that you came out the winner of, however that was determined, it's relevant, right? Like that should be relevant in the computation. And moreover, it's a thing we easily have access to because we know the people you played against. We know all of their win percentages.
Yeah.
You know,
so the common argument against, so there's two problems here. We did a podcast maybe 4 or 5, 6 weeks ago now about strength of schedule. The great majority of people had never heard of it before. And some people had heard of it, but didn't really understand how it worked and so on. So we did a podcast and that's like been quite, that was probably the podcast that a lot of people, particularly in the UK, picked up on and, you know, were saying to their friends, you need to listen to this, etc., etc. And it's the one we've had the most feedback on from tournament players saying that that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
But the most common argument against it is, well, if you are ranking me by who I played, then that's completely out of my control. So am I not just randomly maybe losing the tournament because I got paired against weaker people? That's the common argument.
Sure. And to me, that's where I'd be sympathetic to your original position that, well, that seems a better case than than letting you win the tournament because you randomly got paired against worse people.
Exactly. Right? And this is currently the discussion we are having with some players in the UK is some people don't necessarily recognize that fact. Some people say, well, it's nothing to do with the fact I got paired with weaker people. It's to do with the fact that I played better. In my experience, if you're a good player paired against a weak one, you should be beating them every time. It doesn't matter if you play better or not. You should be beating them every time. So, yeah. But, you know, obviously we're in agreement here. There are people who disagree on principle. I think generally it's because they don't completely understand how strength of schedule works. Like, people don't realize that if you win 4 games before you lose your last one, or if you know, you are almost certainly going to be ranked higher than someone who won 3 games before they lost one, but then still ended on 4-1. Right. A lot of people fundamentally don't get that that's how the maths works out. They just think that, oh, well, you know, if the people I played were worse, then I'm going to end up worse. They don't get that it is on you. It is on you to go as far as possible before losing your first game.
Right.
To give yourself the edge against people who do still end on the same record.
You know, somebody just, I got to shout out Haywo Twitch here in the comments, who actually said something that I think he meant it somewhat comically, but I know Haywo had played a lot of competitive Magic, which competitive Magic uses strength of schedule like crazy, right? As do plenty of other systems. It makes you root for your opponents.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like and when they're strength of schedule, when that's a factor, I keep track of the people who I played against. And I'm like walking over like, come on, buddy, you got to bring this home for me. Let's go, man.
Plus the fact, it means you don't go into tournaments thinking, oh, I hope I get the guy who's playing the Comedy Goblin army so I can smash him into the dirt. You know, you go in there wanting to play people on your level. I want to play all the people who I know will be ending the tournament on 4-1 or maybe another 5-0. I want to play those people.
Yeah.
You know? And, you know, like you want to play when you're playing Swiss properly. And I don't think Swiss is ever real Swiss without strength of schedule. You want to play people on your level, and the system will make you find people on your level.
And by the way, that's true. Even like we're talking about it sort of from the perspective of being the winners, but I think that's true at all levels, right? Like if I am that less skilled person or have a funny army or a weaker list or whatever, you know, I just brought what I like to play with the models I like. I'm probably not inclined to spend my 5 games getting my teeth kicked down the back of my throat by like, you know, sort of the hardest edge players with the hardest edge lists. I want to play other people who are, you know, here for similar reasons. That if that's properly happening, everybody has the best time, right? And so like, to me, it's beneficial at all levels of the event.
That's why Swiss is so beautiful, isn't it? You know, you find your level, don't you? And you play like-minded people, you know, it's great.
Because a good tournament isn't good because the top 3 people had a good time. It's good because 100 people, if it's a 100-person tournament, had a good time. That's what's going to make it be 120 next year, right? If only 3 people had a good time in your tournament, congratulations on the last year of your tournament, right? So, you know, this is final year. All right. Well, there we go.
That's a big thing that a lot of our accidental effort is going into pushing right now is to push people to move towards strength of schedule rather than kill points, or rather than using soft scores as what essentially becomes a pseudo tiebreaker. It is pushing that, but it's difficult. It's difficult if you're talking to people who've never played Magic. It's generally the way it goes. Like anyone who's played Magic who you say this to, it is probably a lot of people who play Magic are already saying, why don't we use strength of schedule?
Right, you know, because we've been used to it for years. I mean, I started playing competitive Magic in like 1994. Like sure.
And because we know it works as well, but explain it to people who maybe only ever played Fantasy for 15 years and have only ever seen an Excel spreadsheet with the sort button click to decide how to pair things. You know, don't necessarily understand it, but what we've found since we've started talking about this is that a lot of people are coming to us and saying, can you show me how to do this? Because it sounds great.
Right.
And they're telling their friends, and, you know, they're only listening to our podcast once, but it's the one where we talk about how to run a tournament scoring system properly.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's a big deal. And obviously that is, there's tension with a lot of people who have run big tournaments in the UK for a long time and they want to do it their way. And they don't want a new way to happen because they don't want to have to maybe change the way they do things. I don't know, but there's definitely a bit of tension there with people who are used to having done things a certain way. But most people, I say most, that's rubbish. A lot of people are coming to us and saying, "I want to do this. This sounds like a new way of doing things. Let's make it happen."
Well, and as you pointed out, Richie, like, and this is actually a point not to be undersold. We don't live in a world where we're just necessarily trapped to like writing this down on paper or even Excel anymore, right? Like a lot of this can be solved with software, with apps, with a lot of things, that technologies that are coming out to make this kind of stuff easier, where you can hand it to the TO and go, you know what, this will do all of that, right? So you can utilize this strength of schedule easy. You don't have to go in and write the formulas in Excel if you don't want to, right? Here's this app that can do it for you. Like we can live in that world, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. And moreover, even if you do have to live in Excel, there's 100 people who already have these spreadsheets written who can give you the formulas. It's not even in that world. It's not like it's that long of a bridge to cross here.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we went on for like a long time. I think I had it scheduled for like an hour and a half, comically. But now we're over 3 hours. And so I am sensitive to the fact that it's probably 1 a.m. where you guys are. And you probably have work because this is a weekday. So I think we've covered most everything. But I'll give you if you have any final thoughts you want to share on this, any other sort of advice, thoughts, just general sort of stuff about anything we've talked about, feel free to go ahead and share. I'll give you the last words here.
No, nothing I'd like to add. I really enjoyed coming on, and it was great chatting to you. And you definitely brought up some points that will make me think, and I think a lot of people think about some of the stuff that's come from secondaries and that. So yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, I agree. It was really nice talking to you. Thanks for having us on as well. I thought it was interesting the way we agree on bits and some not bits. It's like you're in this bit where you're an ex-Magic player, so you got some of the bits, but you got different opinions from the hobby side and everything. And I think that's awesome as well. It was different.
Well, I think what US players are used to in their events compared to what UK players are used to in their events is very different as well. And
oh my gosh, I had no idea. Like, this has been so illuminating to me for UK events.
Yeah. But one of the things we've said a few times is we'd like to get some US tournament players on our podcast to talk about differences and stuff. But I think there's definitely some things we could probably learn from each other in some ways as well, I think. So, but it's been brilliant coming on. Thanks for having us. It's been awesome.
Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Like, seriously, this has been an immensely fun conversation. I hope other people have extracted value from it. So at the very least, look, it's 3 hours of content with a lot of people discussing stuff. If you're not a tournament player, well, at least it's some words you can paint to. So there you go. That's nice. You can still get that hobby on. But guys, thank you so much. This has been tremendous fun. Check out the podcast. It's linked down below. They're discussing a lot of great stuff. They're really putting out some wonderful thoughts in the world. So check it out. Find that down there. Link it. Sub it up. Give them a listen. Give them some feedback. Rate that podcast. Tell them why you like it. It's good stuff. So, but for all of you out there watching, certainly appreciate it. This has been a high comment number episode. Lots of people, lots of side chats going on. I love to see that. So, but to all of you, thank you very much. Appreciate you watching. And as always, we'll see you next Wednesday.